I'm Tara.
I'm Ryan.
We love Disney movies.
So we decided to watch them all, from Snow White
to Frozen 2 and beyond. Each episode will watch a different Walt Disney Animated Studios film and tell you all about it.
Did we like it? Does it hold up? Who's our favorite hero?
Or villain.
We'll give you history and fun facts about each movie.
And sometimes we'll invite our friends to watch along with us.
So put on your tiara
or your evil crown
and join us on our adventure.
This is Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries. Hello, listeners. We are back with another fun and controversial movie.
This one is not nearly going to be as bad as Pocahontas. Yes, I will say that.
We are back with The Hunchback of... Now, here's a question. How do you say it?
I believe we should say Notre Dame.
Okay, and Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Unless he's playing football. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is rude.
Yes, okay. Hunchback of Notre Dame, and we have a very special guest.
If you've listened to our Toy Story episode, you know we were excited to have this person on, to hear his dulcet tones grace our eardrums. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend John. John, say hello.
Hello, everybody. Wow, my reputation precedes me. So exciting.
Yes.
John is a long-time friend of Tara's.
Long-term. Been in a long-term relationship since middle school.
Friendship. And when I think one of the first Jersey friends we met because it was when we went out with
I think
Dan
so,
and Kelly.
because I was down in Maryland when you were there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We went out to a Mexican restaurant, and we went by what's the big cathedral there?
Oh, do we go to the National Cathedral?
Yes.
Oh,
National
wow.
Cathedral. And we couldn't get in, so we just kind of walked around. So the joke
we went to the gardens in the back, right?
We hung out, and you can tell how much of an impact this had on me, because I remember going home and going, I want to hang out with John more. And if you know John, it would be a long time before we saw him again.
I'm a limited time only engagement sometimes, but
yes.
but I do.
And John then became our spiritual advisor, which also fits very well into this film. He became our officiant at our wedding.
I did. Well, it was that was the last wedding I've done. I haven't done one since then, and I tell a lot of folks ask me, what is it like to officiate weddings? I recommend it highly. It's one of the most fun things you can do for your family, friends, and loved ones. And I always say, I've done 4 weddings. I think I got better at each one, but the one I did for you all, it was just the best time. It was such an honor. It was so fun. And I delivered what must have been the strangest, the strangest wedding ceremony. But I thought it was very fitting for you too. We kind of nerded out and talked about, fairy tales and wizards during my little sermon. So.
It was perfect. I loved it.
My favorite part was apparently you were working on it right up.
I was.
You were adjusting it. You weren't writing it first draft. You were sitting there looking at it going,
I think I kept running back to Jeremy and Kelly and sort of checking things and crossing things out. So yeah, it was great fun.
Well, yeah. So today, like you said, we're talking about the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I screwed it up at Notre Dame.
I think I will screw it up, which is kind of why I said that at the beginning.
Do you want to hit us with a brief synopsis?
Oh, yeah, I don't have that because I feel like we stopped doing that. So hold on.
Well, I will, however...
do you want to talk about our memories with it while I pull up the synopsis?
Let's do that first. Now, John, I was thinking, us remembering asking you to do this, and it's very funny because I was thinking of it this morning, and I thought, oh yeah, it was at Christmas, and we were all hanging around talking and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that can't possibly be true. We started this after the pandemic, so it must have been on a...
It was on a Zoom,
It was on a Zoom call where we... that felt so homely that I just was whisked away to Mary Ellen's house and...
God, that's funny though, because I kind of remember it being at a holiday too, but I guess it must have been a holiday timed Zoom that we did. I kind of remember sitting on Mary Ellen's couch, but I guess I'm wrong too.
Yeah, right? Isn't that funny? Okay. But did we, and I will be honest, during that time I think we were being like, you need to do our podcast, here's a movie you should do. And I don't remember, did we ask you to do this one, or is this one you wanted to do, or is this just one Like, what are your memories with Hunchback? Why are you doing this today?
Well, that's a good question. No, I can't remember if we talked specifically about a movie. I remember you and Tara telling me about this project and me basically leaping out of whatever chair I was sitting in and exclaiming that I was desperate to do an episode with you because I think this is just the coolest project, coolest idea. And I don't know if it's as unique as I used to think. I mean, I think it might be kind of unique, but we just have, I think, you two, the friends that Tara and I grew up with, that Disney was just such an animating part of our lives. It was something that was so influential and kind of comforting. And even through high school, when we were just the biggest nerds you could imagine, and we would have sleepovers where we would watch Disney movies, and it was just it has stuck with me through my whole life that these classic Disney movies especially have sort of punctuated my life in really interesting ways. But The Hunchback is interesting to me as I think about my history with it, because I guess maybe it's just the product of my age, but I felt like I was sort of aging out of Disney movies at a certain point. I hit Lion King, I hit Pocahontas, and then I don't know that I even saw Hunchback in the theater. I think I might have taken a hiatus from Disney movies, and I didn't circle back to it for a while. And I don't know why it didn't really stand out as something that was that interesting to me. And then I finally saw it some years later, and I just couldn't believe I'd waited that long. The story, the music especially. And I will get into this, I'm sure, but there are parts of Hunchback that the story is kind of, in my view, unlike most other classic Disney movies. And I find those differences to be fascinating, and to sort of hear audience reaction to those differences. I just find the movie to be just a gem in the Disney canon.
Well, it's interesting you said you kind of fell off, because I have been saying for many, many episodes that I fell off. I got too cool for Disney before this, and as we went through and I actually looked at what movies were around Pocahontas, it was just Pocahontas. I've seen this one in theaters. I know I said I jumped off and jumped back on for Hercules, but I just skipped Pocahontas. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I started watching scenes from this. I'm like, I saw this in theaters.
Yeah.
I think it was another situation where I was with my high school girlfriend and she wanted to go see him. I say she wanted to go see him. I might have also been I grew up with, as almost all of us did, with a good healthy dose of toxic masculinity. So I'm sure I was Francette wants to go see the Hunchback. I'm just going because whatever. Instead, I'm like, ooh, Disney movie.
I think I missed out on that dose of toxic masculinity, but I think I was
probably
owed it at some
healthier
point.
for it.
Yeah. I know. Well, and I can remember very clearly, John saying, circling back to it with the music, and we talk about this in Toy Story, but all of us around the piano. John plays piano.
That's right. That's how we
singing
brought up
God Help
John,
the Outcast,
right.
singing Hellfire, which is not a great song to sing.
Yeah,
and we'll go into it, but it's one of my favorite villains. I like it as a villain song for many reasons, and then I'm like, oh, this is really dark.
That's the thing I remember the most from this, is there's a lot of kind of iffy stuff.
Yeah, and I have I think we're going to get into that in this next section here, because we both have facts and history on the film itself. But as far as a synopsis, and I don't know, this is from IMDb. No, I never say
You
it
are
right.
not dyslexic, but you're just dyslexic
IMDb,
about that.
Just that.
I don't know why.
But so this is their synopsis. It's not great. But a deformed bell ringer must assert his independence from a vicious government minister in order to help his friend. Now, we are going to refer to her as a Romani dancer. Have we decided?
Roma's another.
Roma,
You can say
me.
Roma, you can say Romani.
They refer to her, we're just going to say it here once, as a gypsy dancer. I will say Ryan will mention it as well in the documentaries, but I have a Disney art book of Hunchback, and it that word is everywhere. So they obviously in the 90s, it was not considered. I think it was considered a derogatory
I don't think
term?
it was considered. I mean, it was
I
just
think
the term was more used as just a catch-all for that group of people.
What I'm saying is that group of people maybe didn't like to be called that, but the greater public wasn't. Or
Right.
Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think it's been used as a derogatory term that was just okay back then.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think it's a term that wasn't okay, but the greater public didn't know it wasn't
When I
okay.
say it was okay back then, I mean, like, I don't know what I mean, but I think you guys know what I mean.
Yeah,
Right.
and I feel like I clumsily tried to just explain it there, but
I don't know. I like watching John kind of watch us stumble over our words as a
Well,
communication
I'm just gonna
director.
I'll let
It's like,
you all handle this.
Go right ahead. What do you want to
say?
No, I know. It's like it's
Not so easy, is it?
I think
civilians.
It's
Yes,
funny too
yeah.
that there's. I mean, I've listened. I think I can't remember which of your previous podcast episodes we listened to, but that I listened to where this came up, and I'll remember which one it was. But it's interesting to think of Disney movies, which obviously is the case, as just another piece of art that was a product of its time. And certainly there are Disney movies, as we all now look back and know, that were a product of, we've moved beyond some of the vernacular, some of the stereotypes, and we've progressed in a really positive way. But it's interesting even just to look back. I mean, Hunchback feels like, I guess I was in middle school, or maybe I was in 6th grade when it came out.
96. So
1996, yeah. So I was like, it's not all that long ago, but still we have to sort of make these adjustments as we review it.
So to kind of continue on, like after the synopsis, it was 1996. It got.
Can I do the? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It got a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then you always do the top movies of that year.
Yes, and I also remembered what I was going to say that we cut out all my stammering earlier, so we'll get to that in a sec. But the top movies of that year, I kind of want to do a little more than 3 for a reason here. We've got the top 3 were Independence Day, Twister, and Mission Impossible.
That's another slice of movies I love.
Oh, well, then the next 4 are all Disney movies.
Really?
The Rock, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 101 Dalmatians, the Glenn Close version, and Ransom, which I didn't realize was Disney.
Interesting.
Ransom with Mel Gibson?
with Mel Gibson.
Give me back my son!
Oh
Sometimes I just
my
do that. It makes me feel
gosh.
better.
Wait, Ransom was a
my son.
Disney movie?
I'm shocked it wasn't Touchstone. The same with The Rock. It might be that they're putting Touchstone under Disney
I
right
think
here.
that's what they're
but
doing. I think
we'll go into that later.
They
Okay.
might be
When,
Touchstone.
when
but
we've
still.
exhausted all of our Disney movies and we go to just our Touchstone.
That was a big year for movies.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
thing I wanted to say earlier was this and Pocahontas are 2 odd choices, I think, for Disney. Like Lion King was getting into kind of weird where it wasn't a fairy tale, but it was like let's do this story we've made up that's about animals, like we've done talking animal movies. And then they go, let's do a fairy tale version of a real person.
And we talk about that extensively, so go to that episode.
Talking about Pocahontas. And then they do a fairy tale version of what is a pretty dark story.
Totally.
So what I read,
The Victor Hugo story done in like
1831.
1831. Yeah.
And I've got some information on that. But what I read about when you're saying it's weird, it's not that weird if you think of the origins of Disney. Walt Disney based a lot of the early movies on literary works. So they felt that this
Fair.
was considered a very big and important literary work. It's very dark. It's racist. There's a lot of like really intense moments. And John, have you read the original story?
Oh, long time ago, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I've not.
Yeah, it's
go ahead,
it's
yeah.
interesting. It's I mean, just what you're saying. It's very mature and dark. I mean, there's frankly like a genocidal effort. There's a city uprising, and it's the mix of religion and oppression. There's a lot there.
Yeah, and so I've just from what I've gleaned from it, because I haven't read it, but that's what I would say. It's not. I see where you're coming from with it, but I can also see what they were talking about it in the art book I have about how they want it to kind of get back to that, that if Walt Disney was alive at this time, this would be a project he would be excited about.
I will say that's what every Disney project
know.
they're going to say.
I
Like,
know.
Walt
They
would
always-
love this.
yes,
no,
yes.
Walt wouldn't love it because they're unionized now. Because
So I'll kind of go into also I always talk about Oscars. This was nominated for Best Musical Score, but Emma won that year. The movie Emma.
Oh, interesting. I've never seen Emma.
with Gwyneth Paltrow
Yeah, I've not seen
and
it.
the Arrow.
Yes, yeah, but that's
That's
what
all I
won.
know. You now know everything I know about that movie.
Same, yeah. But the original story was a French Gothic novel. We mentioned Victor Hugo. It was written in 1831, and apparently it was written during his own personal crisis of faith. And I think that when you look at it through that lens, it makes a little bit of sense, some of the themes and the storylines. The original title was Notre Dame de Paris, or probably de Paris. Again, I'm going to butcher anything that's French. And then eventually it was changed to The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's said to be a key text in French literature, and it's been adapted to film over a dozen times, in addition to both television and stage adaptations as well. The novel sought to preserve values of French culture in a time period of great change. And it also made the cathedral a national icon. So, he was obsessed, from what I read. So the art book, too, with Disney, this one's a little bit different than the other ones I have, where they really just break it down like character by character, and the cathedral is a character, and I would agree with that the cathedral is like a very strong character in the film. But he was obsessed with that architecture, and he was obsessed with like restoring that cathedral and just so there's a lot there.
I had read something.
Well.
Is it right? I think, or you might need to fact check me on this, but I think I had read something.
We don't fact check.
Yeah,
on this, so you're not expecting that sort of.
For the
Perfect.
Most part,
Like,
Then you're
if
gonna
you can't
keep
Google
this,
it
whether
real
it's
quick,
true or
guess
not,
what? It's
you're gonna keep it in. I think he wrote this riffing off what Tara's saying at a time when a lot of this Gothic architecture in France was either being modified, torn down for new modern buildings, and I think it's mentioned at some point that this was a time when they had actually removed the stained glass from Notre Dame and replaced it with clear glass in order to let more sunlight in, and that Victor Hugo was part of this community that was outraged at what they saw as this destruction of this critical part of French culture. And I think that's true again, but it's
beautiful, so I'm not going to fact check it.
I mean, it tracks, I will say, from what I read, as far as like how strongly he felt about preserving this Gothic architecture. So yeah, it's super interesting. So also in the story, I'm going to talk about how the original story ends. It's a bit shocking and dark, so just wanted to prepare you for it. Spoiler, I didn't prepare us for it, and Ryan was shocked, and so now we're going back.
I was going to make a joke. So the shock you're about to hear is
you have
going
to act
to be
surprised, Ryan.
Yes, it's acting here.
Lion face,
at its
lemon
best.
face, lion face. Okay, we're ready. Let's do this.
So in the end, Frollo hands Esmeralda over to the troops, and he watches her hanging and laughs.
Sorry, I'm making a joke at a very serious part.
No, but it's really intense.
Dark.
And I'm going to refer to Quasimodo as Quasi. I'm going to just abbreviate his name probably throughout this. But
you can call him Q if you want.
I guess I can call him Q. He sees this, and
that might be like
pushes...
a QAnon situation. You might be like,
I was thinking Q,
Bond.
like James Bond.
Yeah.
This is my political perspective being brought into play.
All right,
like,
Quasi.
Quasimodo, looks like an ordinary church bell, but when you press this button,
yeah, exactly.
Yes. But so he sees him laugh, and so he pushes him from the height of the church.
Yep.
That's how Frollo dies. And he has a similar death from falling from a high height in the Disney film.
Very famous Disney villain death.
Yes.
Falling from a great height.
However, with nothing left to live for, he vanishes, Quasi, and he's never seen again. And in the original, the skeleton of him is found many years later in the... I think it's the Charnel House. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, where they bury all the criminals. Right?
That's the mass grave. And so they find his skeleton there, and it's implying that he sought out Esmeralda and just laid there next to her and just slowly died.
Yes. And I read, is this right, Tara, that at the end of that original part, when they try to pull the skeletons apart, Quasimodo's skeleton disintegrates?
Yes, it turns to dust.
Which
yes,
is
you
like,
are correct in that.
so
Yeah,
what can there be a more tragic ending?
I understand what you're saying, Tara. So do you now understand where I'm coming from, where I say this was a strange choice?
Yeah, 100%. I 100%.
Like,
yes,
Peter Pan was weird, but this
chose a different literary work.
Mm-hmm,
Yes, I agree with you. They took a...
I mean, it could be like, Walt Disney loved literary work, so that's why this summer Disney's Angela's Ashes is coming to you.
Oh, my word.
No, it doesn't work.
Yes, I agree. I think they're both, like, strong points. But did you want to mention something, Ryan? Or
mean, no, that's what I had. So no.
Okay. I always kind of find some interesting facts in history, and then I think we're going to go a little bit into each character because we both have some stuff on that.
Nice.
But one of the things that I found super interesting is the original 3 gargoyles were named Chansey, Loughton, I think, and Quinn, and they were after actors who played Quasi in other versions
I
of
didn't
Hunchback.
know that. That's
so not
cool.
the Disney version. So those are the original names. But Disney's legal department came in and rejected that and said, no, don't do that. So that's when they were changed to Victor and Hugo, and that makes sense. It's Victor Hugo, the
And
guy who wrote the
Laverne.
book. And do you want to know
Yes.
what Laverne came from? Do you know?
What if I said no? Like I was like, no.
No, but do you
Yes.
know where?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's not Laverne and Shirley, but it is another kind of cultural reference. The director came up with Laverne after one of the Andrews sisters, which is my area of the world, a 1940s singing group. They sang "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree" like with Bing Crosby.
Stop.
Tara is not old enough. Like when she said it's her version of the world, it's because she works with
it's with older adults.
Yes.
So I know.
I'm not married to a.
Your listeners are like, how old
Some sort of
is
immortal.
Tara? My
Yes,
Yeah.
how old is she? But yes, so that was the inspiration, which I thought was fun. And Laverne's original voice was Cyndi Lauper.
Oh,
Did you
my
come across
Really?
that?
Like that was her
Yes.
first choice?
She had done some of it, and apparently they decided to go in a different direction. And and there was someone else before Jason Alexander, and I forget who that was. But those 2 voices,
Wow.
they were kind of reluctant to let go of the roles.
Listen, and we'll post
And
this on the
then-
thing, but after seeing Jason Alexander host the making of, I could have done without him. He was like, Hugo's the real star of this picture. And it was like all jokes. I was like, I just started skipping through stuff. after
fast
the
forward.
Pocahontas one, which was probably not handled well, but was the like actual Native American voice of Pocahontas being like, many years ago, the settlement of Jamestown was blah, blah, blah. And then Jason Alexander was like, hey, it's me, Jason Alexander.
boy.
Your 4th favorite cast member from Seinfeld.
Truly. Wow, that's crazy. Poor Cindy. Well, we'll see you, Cindy.
I
Thanks
know.
for your work.
Yeah, but share who the voice of Laverne is.
It is Mary Wicks, who is, you might remember as Sister Mary Lazarus in
Sister Act.
Sister Act.
I don't think I knew that.
Yes,
Yeah.
also in White Christmas.
Yes, yeah, she's in White Christmas as
Oh.
the innkeeper, the busybody
Yes.
in the innkeeper.
Wait, in Sister Act, she's like the deaf choir director before Whoopi Goldberg
Yes.
takes over the choir?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
my
yes.
The one who's like,
Lord.
if you think you can do it, sister.
Of course she is. How did I never make that connection before?
Yeah.
Wow.
She also
I didn't either until I was watching the making of it. And I was like, holy cow.
She also sadly passed before the completion of recording all of her lines. So they have a voice double, and they made it so you wouldn't really be able to tell what lines are hers and what aren't. So this was her last credited.
God, what a
thing that she
legend.
did.
What a
Yeah.
legend.
I love her. The other thing I've got here, the Latin chants in the film were adapted from actual Gregorian chants. That was just an interesting thing. That
I have
came
something
across.
I want to talk about. Do you guys remember? You might be too young for this, but like in the early to mid 90s, there was this weird, like, the Gregorian chant CD that was like big. Do you guys remember this?
No, but I took a music history class, so we did a whole like Gregorian chant section, like chapter of like music history. But no, I have
There
no
was
idea
a
what you're
CD,
talking about.
so I guess like CDs are getting to the point where everyone's got CDs now. Like they're not really a new medium, but it's not old hat yet. And I just remember everybody I knew. It was like in middle school for me, so it was probably elementary school for you guys. Had this Gregorian, we were just old enough to start having our own CDs, but we all had this Gregorian chant CD, and I borrowed it from my friend PJ. You remember PJ?
Yeah.
And like played it in my car and just was like, this is really like for maybe about 10 minutes just to be like, this is interesting. But I remember distinctively like pulling up next to someone like later. So I was in middle school, it happened. So this is later when I put it on, or maybe my mom was driving. I remember being in a car and having the window down and have someone like looking at me very strangely because this Gregorian chant CD was playing.
That person
like
was
you and
probably me,
Chris.
Ryan. That's very. I thought I had weird CDs, but that's an interesting choice.
Yeah. That's you and Chris doing the Tibetan throat singing.
Yeah.
That's the on
I like
par
Tibetan
with that.
throat singing. It was just, the CD made a ridiculous amount of money.
Wow.
Like
You're gonna have to look that up and put it on the Facebook
yes,
page.
I will.
That's right.
So going back to the gargoyles, here's an interesting fact. They're never called gargoyles in the movie, even though they're commonly known as such, because they're actually grotesques. They're not gargoyles.
I love that.
So I
love
did
that
a
they're
little
grotesques.
dive, not a super deep dive, but grotesques are statues of demons or monsters to scare away evil spirits. So they're actually grotesques, whereas a true gargoyle is hollow and it's used as a spout for draining rainwater, which I never knew. I found that interesting. So it comes from a French term meaning to gargle. So that's where gargoyles.
Stop it. Are you
So,
kidding me? I've learned
what I found.
more in the
Yes.
first few minutes of this podcast episode than in like
We try
years
to
of my life.
educate
That's great.
as much as possible here.
That's
Well,
so interesting.
can I jump in with just one more thing? I'm going to find
Yeah.
more vision. But the name of the CD was called Chant. It was by the Benedictine monks of Santo Domenico de Silos. And this was the cover. Maybe this will help. It's available for like to buy used on Amazon right now. But this was the cover.
Oh my
Can you
gosh!
see
No,
that?
I
I've
can
never
see half
heard
of
of
it.
that.
Yeah,
Okay,
there
there
it
you
is. That's you heard it here, folks. Chant the CD. So it may also be available on a cassette tape. We'll see.
Because I'm also remembering that I didn't borrow my friend PJ's version of this thing. He had a parody version, which was people singing Gregorian chant versions of like Nirvana and
Oh,
Alanis
wow.
Morissette.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to look that. Now I remember that it's like
Now you're going
it's
down
like,
the deep
now
dive
it
into Gregorian chant.
entertain us, but it's all them chanting.
Oh, my
So
Lord.
anyway, sorry, this is a weird tangent to go down.
So I always like to do things to look out for, and then I think we can kind of maybe go into like each character a little bit here. But one thing to look out for, and so we're really going to have to keep our eyes open for this. Apparently, when Quasimodo sings Out There, the camera pans over Paris and it zooms in on a street. Supposedly, you can see Belle walking and reading her book.
Love it.
You can
Ooh.
see, yeah, so that's
a
a fun
crossover
connection.
event.
This next one is kind of sad. You can see Pumbaa being carried on a pole by
Oh,
two
no.
people. So I don't like that one.
Okay.
Oh no,
That's kind of funny,
And then
actually.
yeah, and then another man in a gray blue
Hey,
tunic.
Tara, if it bothers you, just no worries.
No,
Oh.
Kuna Matata.
Oh no, I have to go. Actually, I have an appointment. I have to vacuum my room. I'll see you.
And then the third thing to look out for, I guess this is all happening very close together, like one after the other, is a man in a gray blue tunic is shaking out a carpet. It's the carpet from Aladdin.
I love it.
So
Oh,
those
I
are
love
those are things to
that.
look out for. There's also a Goofy holler. We track the Goofy holler because it's in many of Disney films.
Mm-hmm.
After the soldiers fall from the rope, Quasimodo pulls the rope and they fall. There's a Goofy holler there. So
okay.
I figured I'd make it a little lighthearted before we kind of get into some of the darker points here. The other thing I thought I'd highlight here too is talking a little bit about the computer animation. So
This is really cool.
Yeah.
This is in the making of, and it's definitely worth suffering through Jason Alexander to get to this part because it's the next step up from the wildebeests.
yes,
I think.
yeah. So I'll share my facts and then you obviously chime in because you
Yeah, yeah.
watched the making of. But this movie is full of computer animation and CGI backgrounds. So all of the bells in the film are 3D rendered. So that's something to kind of look out for and pay
cool.
attention to. In the song Out There, when he slides down the flying buttress.
That's correct. You got it.
Thank you. That
You worry
appears
about
in
your
3D.
pronunciations. You're pretty good most
The
of the
I
time.
flying
know.
booty. The flying booty.
Yeah, the flying
Butress.
Butress. That appears 3D. Topsy-turvy, during that scene, the confetti and the crowd of people are digital images.
The crowd of people is a thing I saw because they had like 6 or 7 different people, and then you'd show them and they have these different models. So it's like big fat guy, skinny guy, fat woman, skinny woman, like child, like all these different things. And then they would go, okay, then they all had different clothes, and the clothes are different colors, and then they had different masks and different like hats and mustaches. So they do all that, and it just like
That's interesting.
they make a bunch of them. And so there's a bunch of scenes where you have this like really animated, and the guys in the background are kind of like and they're just like moving their arms. And I think the wildebeest scene is amazing. I think that one looks
In The
really
Lion
good.
King,
In
yeah.
The Lion King. I'm curious to see how this holds up because I haven't seen this in a long time.
Yeah.
But this is around the same time they're doing that in like Titanic and all sorts of stuff. It's just interesting to me. I didn't realize they did it so much in Disney movies at this time.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Also, in God Help the Outcasts, the reflection of the rose window, those images are computer rendered. So something else to kind of look out for.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when Quasi rappels down to save Esmeralda, that's hand-drawn animation with 3D scenes. So that's the mixing both styles. So I thought that's cool because that's a very specific example and a very
also an
memorable
epic
point in the
part
film.
of the novel, if I'm remembering, or the original Victor Hugo book, is when he sort of rappels down the cathedral and swings and tries to save Esmeralda. So that's interesting that they would pick that scene to do that with.
Yeah, to do both styles.
It was really interesting the making of, because they kept talking about, like, it was like, they're like, most people will say that we use computer animation too much. Like, they're like reacting to the feedback from Toy Story.
Yes,
he's like, but remember, this part is still hand animated. And it's like, there was a part of me that was like, yeah, keep computers out of Disney movies. And like, I still love a good hand animation, but like, you know, you look at Klaus or something now that has that look, but is still done with computers.
Yeah.
Klaus.
Klaus, are you talking about Frozen?
No. It's not a Disney movie. It's the
movie on
Halloween.
Netflix.
I'm all over the place. The Christmas movie.
The Christmas movie. I think
like,
it's Claus. It's Claus because it's Santa Claus.
Yes. Whatever. Cut this all out, Ryan.
I wish I could help with this. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I just remember being very much like, like computer animation is this and hand animation is this. And now it's like computer animation looks so good, like you don't even really go. I think some people still miss hand animation for certain things.
The nostalgia of it, you know?
Yeah. So I think we'll start with Esmeralda because I know Ryan has a bit of stuff he wants to
yes. One more quick thing. Chant peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200 music chart and was certified as double platinum.
Stop it.
Meaning 2 million copies were sold in the United States.
2 million American citizens bought the CD Chant.
Yes.
Well, to talk about that, I'll say that in the first 18 months of Victor Hugo's novel release, he sold 3,000 copies, which was a big deal in that time. So
1800s.
we'll just kind of...
That's called going viral in the 1800s.
In the 1800s, you could not meet 2,000 people in your lifetime.
Yeah, truly. Exactly.
It's a huge deal. But I wanted to talk about one thing about Esmeralda specifically, and then I'm going to let Ryan kind of dive in from there. But Esmeralda's eyes are green. And so I kind of went down this little rabbit hole as to why. And supposedly in the Middle Ages, green eyes were considered to be a sign of magic, of evil, or witchcraft. So cool. But probably because they were rare would be my assumption, is they're not as common.
So is this something from the book, she had green eyes?
So I don't know if she had green eyes in the book. I will say that. I don't know. This fact was just like a fact of the Disney film, like why they think she had green eyes. So I would have to go and try to look that up. However, then they started talking about how a lot of the early Disney villains have green eyes. Can you name any Disney villain that has green eyes? Because I've got a list.
Does Scar have green eyes?
Yes, Scar has green eyes.
The evil queen from Snow
White, she has green eyes. John, it's okay if you don't know. Ryan and I have seen these movies
I'm doing some very quick Googling here, so...
How many more do I have?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more.
Okay, not Gaston because he has blue eyes.
He does, yes.
Hades doesn't, right? He has like black or blue eyes.
No, he has, yeah.
Are we only talking about ones that came out before this one, though?
Yes, all of these came out before this one.
Ursula does or doesn't? Yeah, because she's got darker eyes. Green eyes. Maleficent
has green eyes.
Oh, there we go.
3 more.
What about, is there anyone in Lady and the Tramp with, or...
not that I have.
Cats? Okay.
Yeah, no.
Not Cruella.
Not Cruella. You can go back
Captain
further, though.
Hook doesn't.
Nope.
Gosh, who would
Shere
it
Khan.
be?
Our favorite our princess that surprised us.
Our princess that's a...
What? Think of the villain and the princess that
Lady
surprised
Tremaine?
us. Lady Tremaine has green eyes.
That
The
makes
stepmother. And there's 2 more. I dressed as her for Halloween this year.
Mad Madam Mim.
Mad Madam Mim has green eyes. And the last one, the diamond.
Oh, Madame Medusa.
Yes, Madame Medusa.
My gosh.
So,
I'm sorry. This is bad radio. But
yes, but my hands coming up.
This is 900 villains.
If only you all could see Ryan right now.
Yeah, you're like drumming your fingers like Mr. Burns from Excellent.
Yes, but that list again is the Wicked Queen, Mad Madam Mims, the Stepmother in Cinderella, Lady Tremaine, Medusa, Maleficent, and Scar. I did not go past what we've done because I thought it would be fun to...
You guys had as much fun doing that as I did. I don't know if it made for great radio.
I'm still trying to Google if Esmeralda has green eyes in the novel, so we'll get back to you on
yes,
that.
please Yeah, if you find that out, I would love to know that. So Esmeralda, even though she becomes this heroine, she is this other, I guess. And I hate to say that, but that's in this film and in this context. So that's why they gave her green eyes, even though she's not a villain, but she is portrayed as evil in Frollo's eyes.
Yeah,
So
and isn't that it's just
went.
like an immediate, it's just another part of this story, right? Where it's just blatant stereotypical, like but for not on the part of Disney, but on the part of Frollo and others who see someone as other because of like the stupidest reasons,
Yeah, and so that's why they gave her green eyes. And the other thing I found out that was interesting, this is a film we have not seen yet, but it is on our list to see before we review it. Rapunzel has green eyes, and so she kind of, Esmeralda and her break the trope of, Esmeralda has the portrayal of evil, right? So you can kind of say she's evil even though she's not with green eyes, but Rapunzel's the first princess to have green eyes. So,
that's interesting. Apparently in the novel, Esmeralda had black eyes.
Oh, well, they're
a much less evil couple.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Take with that.
Thank
what
you
will.
for looking that up, John.
You're welcome. I'm here all day.
Can I talk a little bit about the portrayal of Romani people in this movie?
Yeah.
In the movie specifically. One of the things that I went through and I found some, articles about it. I went to a couple of people of Romani descent, like their thoughts on it and things like that. And these are some of the things I found that were the most like prevalent complaints. I don't want to say complaints because that sounds like let me talk to your manager. These are like legit concerns about the portrayal.
Concerns I think is appropriate.
Thank you. Quasimodo is in the movie, though not visually portrayed this way, but definitely in the book, is Romani himself. He is he is, if you see in the beginning, I haven't seen this in a long time, so I can't remember. He is orphaned by Romani family.
Frollo wants to kill all of them,
right?
And the archdeacon, the deacon, because that's the other thing we should say. Frollo is a judge in this, and he's a.
Oh, he's not a
minister.
No. Well, this
he's
is
of the clergy in the book.
This is like the most interesting part of the Disneyfication of the movie to me, that they take Frollo, who is the archdeacon in the novel, which means that the evil villain of the story is an archdeacon, and instead in the Disney movie they split that into two characters, which is the whole exposition at the beginning of the movie is almost necessary because you have to figure out why on earth is the villain of this movie raising this thing that he obviously on some level detests and wants to exterminate in this horribly racist, bigoted way. But yeah, and I will say in the Broadway musical, although the musical, I can't remember now if it actually made it to Broadway. I think it did. They go back to the original, and Frollo is an archdeacon and sort of in charge of the cathedral.
Yeah, and they talk about, I know we're talking about the Romani
I'll
people.
let you two Catholics
So sorry.
go do some apologizing for you.
Yes, deep apologies.
They talk about how they didn't want to make somebody in the faith potentially be the villain.
Yep.
They talk about that, but they also talk about, that they thought him being a judge, that he potentially had more power, but I think that could be argued the other way around. Yeah. So, but yeah, John, I think you make a good point. But now to go back to what you're saying, Ryan.
Well, so yeah, the point is that the character visually is very much whitewashed in this film, where he is definitely portrayed as a very Caucasian individual. And there's a lot of argument back and forth this, because this is something I found out that I did not know. There apparently are many times when Romani children or people can be born blonde hair, light skinned, and that was a big problem in these times, because then people like government officials would come and take those children away and be like, well, this isn't your child. This clearly isn't your child. You've stolen this child.
My God.
So it was a big issue going back then.
So it's not to say he couldn't have those features, but for all intents and purposes, for how they portrayed him.
And like, again, to use a word we don't want to use very much, but like growing up, like I had a perception of the of gypsies and what that meant, and it was like, it didn't. I don't want to say I didn't think of them as people, but it was more of a like to put it lightly, like elves or dwarfs. Like they were a people I didn't deal
Like,
with very much.
yeah.
So to me, they were almost fictional.
Yeah.
So there was that portrayal, and a lot of things that they
Well,
used to
and I
say,
think in
gypsies
media-
came and stole my children in the night. You've heard that.
Yeah.
That thing, and it's from this because I think, not to say there wasn't ever a Romani kidnapper, but for the most part, there was a lot of perception that they were stealing children.
Yeah, it was like a
because
product
actually
of
their children.
Yeah,
they were actually their children, and genetics. There was a I don't know. I've got some articles that I'll post, but it was apparently an issue of the state coming in and taking these children away.
Yeah.
So that was one thing they said was like, it seems like in this movie the hero is immediately, you look at how all the Romani in the background are portrayed. It's like Esmeralda is beautiful and that's it. Everybody else is kind of drawn as caricatures, and excessive features and that sort of thing. That's what they did. Another thing they talked about that kind of really bothered one of the people. One of the articles I read was there just wasn't a lot of like due diligence done to represent these people in this movie. There was an interview they said with, I forgot the voice actor who played is it Chopin? Like the
Clopin?
Hopin, yeah.
Clopin, it's with
Clopin
a C.
is a
Yeah.
CL, not CH. Chopin is the conductor. Yeah. So Clopin, that actor, they said, "Oh, how'd you get that accent?" And he was like, "Well, they're just from all over Europe, so I just made it up."
Yeah,
And it was like, "Oh, thanks for doing And I think that's kind of, these are a misrepresented people and something that hasn't done a lot of study in. It's like,
well, and they're so misrepresented that people take that as fact, and they take that as, and we kind of found that a little
talked
bit
about that a
with
lot in-
Pocahontas.
yes, with natives people, and they were
And their stories and how they've been portrayed versus like the actuality and the truth.
Kind of funny in the least funny way that a movie that's partly based on the prejudiced oppression and attempted extermination of this people also went to maybe marginal or no lengths to actually represent those people accurately.
I mean, I think it's a lot of like, it's more of an understanding of we don't like oppression than it is like an actual study of the history of what happened to those people. Both
Totally.
Native Americans and the Romani people. It's like, oh yeah, that sucks that people were mean to you, but like it's better than Frollo's doing or Ratcliffe or anything, but it's still like, you need to dive deeper and you need to really understand what happened.
Well, and the other thing is what I will say with the art book is they really focused on, they spent like a lot, like usually the art books I'm super pumped to read them. This one I kind of glazed over a little bit because they spent a lot of time talking about like Victor Hugo's life and like his back, and not to say that's not interesting, but I think their efforts to do research was skewed in not, you know what I mean? They spent a lot of time diving into
a
his
dead
novel,
white guy as opposed to a still living culture.
His novel and his book and all of these different things, and so that was something too. I know you're also, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but Quasimodo, I believe, is the age he's supposed to be in the book, and I want to say that's 20s, I want to say. Esmeralda in the book, from what I read, I believe she's supposed to be 16. Disney aged her up.
Wow.
Yes.
So she's supposed to be younger in the novel. And
Aged her up to Demi Moore.
yes,
Can we
to
talk
Demi
about,
Moore.
do
So.
and this is, we should get to the movie here in a little bit, but I don't have a whole lot. The thing I remember most about this movie is, and this might have been because a young Ryan was blossoming into manhood, but
blossoming.
like she's overly sexualized, correct?
So,
am I making that up, or am I frolloing her myself?
no, I think you
Am I
could
blaming her for my lustful
I think
feelings?
I think you could say that what I found that they did purposefully is in Hellfire, they animate her a little bit more sensually because that's where they wanted to contain that because that's what he's struggling with. So I did read that the way she's animated there is even a little bit more so than it is in the rest of the film.
Yeah.
The other thing I read was when she's dancing in the fire, the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association, they insisted the animators make her clothing more well-defined because she seemed nude to them when they watched it.
Oh, fascinating.
So
meanwhile, we got shirtless people in Fantasia. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that was
If they would have drawn her clothesless, 1996 Ryan would have just exploded out of the seat like a Tex Avery wolf.
There's a little Frollo in everyone.
The quote of the episode. The other things I have about Esmeralda, they designed her, the animators, this is from the art book, to appear fully prepared to stand up to brutal persecutory?
Oh yeah, persecution.
It's persecution, but
What's the adjective for that? Persecutorial. I don't know
however
what that
you'd
is.
say that. They use that. They use that
judgmental
word. That environment and the social conditions she lives. So they say they stressed on curves and rounded shapes to contrast with sharp angles. So I do think that you're right. She feels a little. I think especially when you compare her to the rest of the way the rest of the Romani people are portrayed, she does feel over-sexualized.
The other thing is they talked a lot in the making of about how her outfits were a lot more like multiple draping clothes.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting.
They talk about that in the art book about how they coupled those sharp angles and the curves and the round strapes with the loose, free-flowing colored garments to suggest a freedom and kind of that freedom that contrasts with the gothic pallor and the rigidity of the characters. Like Frollo.
You can sort of think of how she's like sort of portrayed when you think about comparing that to how Frollo is portrayed in their
very
wardrobe.
like straight lines. Yeah, very rigid. So they talk about that. So I will say a lot of thought, as always with Disney, when it comes to the animators and the animation of each specific character, there was a lot of thought with concept art. And I've got pictures I'll share like I usually do of some of the concept art on the Facebook page. But they really put a lot of thought into what that looked like and how they wanted it to compare and contrast to one another.
Tony Fusilli is the animator of Esmeralda in this. Just want to put the artist in charge.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is in the novel, Hugo's metaphorical interplay of light and shadows is kind of throughout the novel. They use that to inspire the effects department to create dramatic lighting and enhance emotions. There are so many examples of this in the book, and just really pay attention to that when you're watching the film, because the way that they do shadows and the way that they do the light is really interesting, and it also, I think, provides some of the emotion to the scenes as well. They also talk about how what they wanted to focus on is that every character in this film is an outcast in some way. Quasimodo, it's his looks. Is it Phoebus? How do you say his name?
I think it's Phoebus.
Phoebus, yeah.
Phoebus, he becomes a fugitive, so eventually he becomes an outcast.
He joins the outcasts. Yeah, he's like an outcast by choice.
Yes.
Phoebus, the first Disney hero to have facial hair.
Ooh, good fact.
My God.
Esmeralda is an outcast, sings a song about it, talking about her people. And then they even say I'm going to say grotesques, but they refer to them as gargoyles because they were carved and discarded because they were imperfect. So they talk about that a little bit. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, so this is the quote I wanted to read from the art book. So the strongest appeal for the project, claims Thomas Schumacher, executive vice president of feature animation, lay in its message. Schumacher asserts our earlier movies say things like it's okay to be you, but that usually meant it's okay to be you if you're a really handsome, winning, young street urchin, or you're a frightening, ill-tempered beast who in the end becomes handsome. So they're referring to Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. This movie says it's okay to be you if you're not necessarily normal in quotes or beautiful in quotes to the rest of the world, which I call a big step forward.
Oh, that's great. I
just wanted I wanted to talk about that because a lot of times we point out the imperfections with the film, but I also think it's important to talk about what their motivation was for the film, for the characters, for the story. So that seems like a very strong motivation and theme throughout the film.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about the progression of Disney. Like, we're at a very interesting point in Disney's progressionism, if that's a word, because like there's a lot of talk about like Disney likes to go like a gay character is in our movie, but like, you know, we're watching Schitt's Creek right now, and there's a lot of like, we keep remarking how
affectionate they are and how amazing that
physically
is. How physically affectionate, because you don't see that.
Yeah.
Some characters are.
And also that they, you know, that in Schitt's Creek, for example, you know, there's one of our favorite characters is someone who you would meet and say, oh, that's a gay guy. You know, I think sometimes,
Yes.
I think it's much better now, but even like 10 years ago when we were starting to see LGBTQ characters portrayed in cinema or on TV, they were straight presenting, handsome gays who
Yes.
it was always shocking when you found out they were gay.
Yes, it was the lesson of like, they could be anyone straight
Exactly.
white people. Like,
Yeah.
you never
Exactly.
know who could be gay.
Yeah.
You could be gay. You don't even know.
Are you kidding me?
And I feel like, but like, yeah, like Disney, it's like remember when we watched the last Star Wars movie and there's like one scene at the end where those two women kiss, and I was like,
They hyped that
I
up
was like-
as like such a big deal.
I was like, give me a, like, I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I
was
still
mad
loved
a lot for
it
that
because
last
every little step is another step forward. But yes,
Oh,
there
yes,
was, it had a lot of
agreed.
hype. Had a lot of hype.
Yeah.
the future Tara and Ryan's podcast diaries, Princess Diaries, will look back at this time and be like, it's not. I still don't think it's a good place to be, but like it's a step on
It's
the ladder
moving
to where
forward.
It's gonna go.
Yeah.
Totally.
So we didn't really talk about Frollo at all, and I know we'll dive into him with the villain ranking and whatnot, but I did just want to share a tidbit or two.
One more thing.
So Frollo is not about one thing. So when you think of a lot of villains, they want power, they want gold, they want revenge. Like they're very kind of one motivation, one strong motivation. He's multi-layered, truly sinister, and just like this really intense evil. So he's a very kind of in a class of his own, I think, as far as villains are concerned.
I'm just fascinated by Frollo. I think, I mean, you two are the experts, so you tell me how rare this is.
Lovers, not experts. Lovers.
Oh,
Yes, we say that.
The
Yes,
lovers,
yes.
the lovers of Disney. So he's a villain who is without superpowers of any kind. He is a villain who, instead of, as you say, Tara, having one sort of motivating, whether it's vengeance, whether it's, to dethrone my brother or my nephew and become king, whatever the sort of immediate, concrete, discernible goal is, Frollo is in some ways a completely... he's completely unsympathetic to me, but there is this element of he's kind of a tragic villain. Like he's falling victim to his own decay, his own internal struggle, and all of the evil and the oppression that he perpetrates on Paris, and especially on our heroes, is like this kind of grotesque, inward-looking kind of, he's starting to rot or something, or maybe he's always been rotting, but it's really he almost becomes this just unstable, crazed villain that I sort of look at him and I think, and which is again why I find there's some interesting things here about how Disney chose to not make him the head of a religion, sort of someone who was sitting in that cathedral, but rather sort of a judicial, administrative person for the city. But you look at him and you're like, what is his motivation? And of course it's eradication. It's frankly kind of a light version of genocide, but it's really hard to discern what exactly causes this level of malevolence from him.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly
I think
with
this
that.
whole movie has a complexity. This is again, it's been a long time since I've seen this one. That maybe isn't, why it maybe doesn't. It deserves to be. This is my opinion, having not seen it in a while.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be interesting to watch this and realize that it might have a complexity that maybe us as a theater-going nation weren't ready for when it came out. Whether it's something that deserves to be in a Disney animated movie, like, is another question. And obviously, they don't handle certain things well. But this is one that I think this is going to be one that I would like to see. We talk about the ones that get remade into live action. Like, this is one I'd like to see remade into live action because they could handle, like, let's address that. Like, whereas it makes sense for Frollo to call Romani what he calls them. Like, the people around them don't call them that.
Yeah.
They discuss that, and we learn some stuff. Like, we pick up all these things. And
Well,
yeah.
And I think Disney did something. So I also have a villain book, and Quasimodo's in the villain book. And I was like, this is weird. Why is Quasimodo in the villain book? And they mentioned because Quasimodo is portrayed as an evil henchman in the horror genre. So I don't think he should be. I still don't understand why he's in the villain book.
I mean,
but
I think in the other genres, it's the portrayal of disabled people.
Yes, but I think making a live action version of the film with him as the hero and like getting rid of that trope of like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of room there that they could do something with that. That's kind of what I was saying with that one. The other thing with the villain book, the supervising animator for Frollo, Kathy Zielinski, I don't know if I'm saying her last name. She, in quotes, said she was so tickled to be doing such an evil person. It was the best villain I've worked on. She apparently loved working on
Interesting.
Frollo.
Well, the other thing, too, about Frollo, maybe you're getting to this, or maybe we'll talk about this later, which is fine. I don't know if this is true. Again, please, so someone will fact check this, or a listener will fact check this. I think I read this.
I just Googled it, John, and it says, I don't know.
It's called Four Pinocchios. I think this may have been Roger Ebert's review I read of when the movie came out. And he talks about, so I think about Frollo, right? And part of, this is so, in the movie, part of his downfall is his infatuation with Esmeralda. And of course, that has its own kind of trope that the man is sort of brought down by their attraction to a woman, and he sort of blames her for that attraction. It's completely psychotic. But this is also the first movie, at least according, I think, to this review I read, where two of our heroes fall in love with the same person, which inevitably is something that's going to lead to somebody being heartbroken, right? Quasimodo and Captain Phoebus both fall for Esmeralda, as does Frollo. She's at the center of this kind of male-caused maelstrom and like storm, right? But Frollo is the one who it destroys, and that's his own doing, obviously, his own psychosis. But I'm not sure if there's any other Disney movie where our villain and multiple heroes are sort of all focused on a singular goal like that, like Esmeralda.
No, that's a good point. And the other thing too is our hero Quasimodo, in the end, he doesn't get the girl. Right?
Yes, and
so
yet
that's that's also
yeah.
a point where a lot of times, if there is a romantic interest with our heroine or with our hero, they usually get
the girl,
their interest.
right? So
they
speak,
get the girl, they get
like,
the guy,
quote unquote,
whatever it is. They get that love interest.
And so as an audience, I think it'll be interesting to rewatch it and see how we feel at the end. But to have Quasimodo not get that, and yet still as an audience, I think we're expected to still be rooting for him, still be on his side, and think, okay, there's something out there for you, Quasimodo, which is, of course, very different than how the book ends.
Yeah, well, it's also the subject of the Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
Oh, boy.
Which we haven't really gone into, but now we will talk about for 30 minutes.
No.
Do we want to start the movie? Is it time?
Yeah, I think it might be time.
Okay, guys, so we're going to take the VHS out of the clamshell and put it in the VCR.
All right, see you on the other side, listeners. All right, listeners, we are back and we have some thoughts. So, any general thoughts that you guys want to share first?
I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. Like, I really, I'm like, oh, I really like this movie. The cultural depictions aside, which I think, again, since most of the, we've talked about that at the beginning. We've covered that. I love the music a lot more. I don't know if it's as catchy, but like
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful music.
Yeah.
It looks beautiful. Like, this one's one that I think going into it, I thought, I don't know, this will be my second and last time watching it. Now I'm like, oh, I'd watch this again.
Yeah, and the thing that I kept coming back to watching it was, and I think the three of us, as we were watching it, kept kind of exclaiming or, reacting at certain moments that seemed, there were just some really adult, not even always dark, but just adult moments. And I kept noticing things ranging from, the role of the crowd, the mob or something, right? That they were at once a force for good who kind of accepted Quasimodo when they were told to, but then they also partook in some heinous, harassment and torture when they were told to. And I don't know, there's something very adult about this story about accepting who you are and being happy or proud of who you are, whatever that sort of overall through line is, but it's more adult than a lot of Disney movies, I think.
I think that's something we should say up front. If you're thinking of showing this to your kid, if you're hesitant to show this to the child, wait 3 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, or just view it yourself.
Yeah.
I always think that's the best recommendation. I know there's a lot of apps and things out there now where you can really read about synopsis, plots, things like that, but I definitely think this is one that you can't just pop on.
A lot of language that we would normally bleep from this, the HE double hockey sticks and things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of talk of that. Well,
Yeah.
but it's in context of heaven and.
Yes.
Should I refrain from my typical profanity while on this podcast?
We quack it out with Donald Duck.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. Yes, thank you for reminding me.
But yeah, I guess I didn't share my memories. I was going to go to how it opens, but the music is what I think transported me back. The music transported me and got me thinking about high school and all of us singing these songs and being around the piano and also just the emotion. The music is so emotional, both the score and each song for the characters, that you kind of get swept up in that. So I think I really enjoyed that.
You played this stuff on piano, John?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's let's just say Hellfire is not a song that was perhaps made for, teenage John the Bombard to play on the piano, but we did it anyway, and we shouted those lyrics
throughout the auditorium.
Well, it's more of I thought it's just a lot of chords. It seems like so many parts.
It's like chamber music, really.
Yeah, a lot of these songs are very so many multi parts that it feels like that's kind of it fills the room like a church choir or an organ.
Yes,
They
exactly.
filmed some of this, I think, with an old organ they used to do some of the recording, like a 100-year-old organ.
Yeah, and that, I'm sure you're about to get to this, Tara, but the opening, just the Bells of Notre Dame, both the opening and the closing. And you know what? It's funny. I just thought of this, and I can't believe it because it's sort of is something that my friends and I watch with some frequency, but it just pops in my head. I will send you. There's this unbelievable video on YouTube that is I don't know or remember the name of the competition, but there's this, I don't know, famous a cappella competition or something. But one of our sort of YouTube videos that's canon for my friends and I is this winning male a cappella group from I don't know where that sings a medley, basically like a 10-minute medley of Notre Dame. And they open and end with the Bells of Notre Dame. And it is just one of the most stunningly, it's just that piece of music, that score. Tara, that word is absolutely correct. It transports you. It just it moves, the score itself moves the story along just as much as the lyrics and just as much as the dialogue. It's just a beautiful, beautiful score.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to see this video now because I want to know if someone in the a cappella group hits that note.
Oh my gosh, that Clopin
you're gonna
hits.
love it.
Yeah,
you're gonna love it.
Because every time he did it, I was like, nah, he's. It's like watching a daredevil stunt at a circus or something. He's not going to do it. No. It's like bells off. No,
it's exactly what it is.
Anytime he's going to go down, he's going to go down any second. No. It's like watching Cirque du Soleil. That's what it feels like.
And that's the song that it opens with. We see Walt Disney Presents, and then it cuts to the castles and the castle in the clouds, which is so breathtaking.
A pretty long cold open, I think, for
until we see the title, and it pretty dark as well. So it starts out kind of lighthearted with Clopin. He's doing a puppet show telling this story of how it opens and the Bells of Notre Dame.
Can I come out the gate with a potentially hot take?
Okay.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Clopin can get.
Whoa!
He is the worst.
Gonna have to quack
gonna have to quack that out, Ryan.
He is the worst.
Interesting. So, as a child, I liked him a lot as a character. I understand why you don't care for him.
Well, say more. Why don't you care for him, Ryan?
I think he incites the crowd.
Yes.
Against. I think he's doing what you're saying. He's inciting the crowd against. Quasimodo at some point. I think he's part of it. I think he's the problem when they go to the Court of Miracles, and then he comes out. Then he's like, "Oh, we were always friends." I'm giving him an Italian accent because his accent is undefinable. It is terrible.
He's definitely a wild card. You kind of don't know where he's not as reliable as Esmeralda.
Yeah, he doesn't have a side. He does what benefits him.
Pick a side, Clopin.
Yeah,
pick a side. But don't you think I think this is probably just a trait of or you will know better than I, Tara, potentially, but a characteristic of that kind of gothic chamber music is that opening is so kind of it's not sinister or something, but there's like a really dark element to that whole piece of music until you get to the very end both times, and it hits that major chord for the very first time. It's like the last note is the first major chord, but it's like pretty dark, I think.
I would agree. And I think, again, so not only the music, I think the music does this, but the coloring, and I read that they did that on purpose. The colors change depending on Quasimodo's emotions as well. And this whole opening sequence is us finding out what happens to his parents.
Yes.
And how Frollo, captures them and then chases the mother because he thinks she has stolen goods, but she has a baby. She has Quasimodo in her arms.
God.
And so she's trying to get to the church for sanctuary. And when he grabs her, she falls and hits her head on
within
the
like
steps
3 minutes of the movie. She's
3 minutes
murdered.
of the film. Yeah.
And they don't do it. Like, what should have happened is there should have been, like, I've watched enough wrestling to see heads hit things. But, like, I feel like there should have been that, like, dropping a watermelon, like, thunk. Like, there should have been that, because it's the hard step.
She hit hard.
Yeah, and
Tara fell down some stairs in Italy. She can tell you how hard European
marble steps
are.
Yeah, they hurt a lot. But she just lays there at his feet, and he immediately looks at a well when he sees it's a baby and sees that the baby is, in his words, a monster. And he goes over to the well to drop the baby, and that's when the archdeacon comes out and is holding his mother, holding his dead mother, Quasimodo's dead mother, and is like, you have to repent for this. Like, you have to care for this child.
You have to make amends.
I will say, I don't know what about you murdered this woman. Let's put you in charge of a baby.
I know, yeah.
Okay, yeah, potentially not the most thought out thing. I will also point out, and I don't know if this is. Well, I don't think I need to worry about spoiling a Broadway musical for anybody, but the adaptation on stage has a completely different origin story for Quasimodo, which I don't even think is based in the Victor Hugo book, but in the Victor Hugo book, I don't know if you remember this, they have Frollo has a brother growing up. They're both orphans. His name is Jehan, I think. And the church raises him, and that kind of is what gets Frollo involved in the Catholic Church. But in the musical, they take that the step further and make it that they're sort of estranged for their entire adult lives. And then at the end of Jehan's life, he reaches out to Frollo and says, I'm dying, of whatever kind of mysterious disease or something he has. And he has this son and says he has nobody else. And when I die, it's over. And he dies. And Frollo takes him in. So he's technically Quasimodo, the musical, is Frollo's family. He's his nephew. Yeah. So I feel like the book, the movie, this Disney movie, and the musical have 3 different origin stories for Quasimodo.
I like that story better because I feel like making him the son of Roma people should have come back, like you're one of them, or like
yes,
and they never really mention
it
again,
they never
but
connect
it's very
back
obvious
to
that those
sort of like a loose end.
Yeah, they're caught up in his hate for these people, but like that's it.
Yeah, and
I was just gonna say I like this had more gasps and what the heck's from you.
I know.
The second only to Return to Oz.
Yes.
I think was the most like, what am I watching?
Yeah, no, and they're just things I either didn't remember or they just hit you differently as an adult.
Yes.
Like the mother in the first couple minutes, I did not remember that at all.
Like, I feel like at first I was doing it kind of because I expected this one to be a little like darker, but then I was like, this really is.
No, it really is a dark. Yeah.
I remember the moment. Oh no, I'm gonna hold that because you're gonna walk through the plot, right? Never mind. There's a particular moment when in the cathedral that we all I think collectively gasped at.
Yes. To go back to Clopin for a minute, they in the art book talk about him being the master of ceremonies, and they compare him to the qualities by Joel Grey in Cabaret or Jonathan Pryce in Miss Saigon. So that's kind of how they.
That's very
Jonathan
interesting.
Pryce was in Miss Saigon.
I guess, yeah.
Like the actor? Or is that the character's name?
Oh, I feel like I should know this.
Is it Pryce with a Y?
Pryce.
Oh, I did not know he was. You know what that is? That's the High Sparrow from Game of Thrones.
Oh, I mean, I'm not as familiar when it comes to like who's been in musicals, but those are the 2 names that they name in the art book that they were trying to base Clopin off of, I think. After Frollo has this interaction with the Archdeacon, that's when it cuts back to Clopin with the puppets, and that's when we see the title of the
Yeah.
movie. So it's after that whole very dark sequence that we then see the title.
And he finishes the riddle that it's a story of who is the monster and who is the man.
Yes,
so good.
yeah.
So good. I remember when you asked me if I had ever been to Paris and if I had ever been to Notre Dame while we were watching, and I have. Something I remember when I was getting one of those, I think a guided tour around the outside of the cathedral grounds, they talk about the cathedral in a couple of different ways that I think this movie adaptation is so successful. And I think part of it is the story, because Victor Hugo obviously meant to, I don't know, use this as something to protect, Gothic architecture such as the cathedral. But I think the movie is so successful in this idea. I remember the tour guide sort of saying the cathedral was always the heart of the city, including, way back in those times. And it's an ever-present, oversized part of the city, so that people would be walking around their town in, Paris of a long time ago, and they would sort of round a corner and unexpectedly there's the cathedral. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of an omnipresent, huge, bigger than life, and even bigger than this story kind of piece of architecture. And the anecdote I remember specifically is that during the French Revolution, or one of the rebellions, the revolutionaries tried to tear down the cathedral, and it was just impossible. They couldn't do it. The best they could do was behead the sort of stone figures that align some walls of the cathedral, but they had ropes tied around the biggest parts of the structure trying to literally pull it down, and they couldn't do it. That's how massive this thing is.
I kept making the joke, at least in my head, of like Quasimodo, like the way it should be is him just running around tearing things. You ever watch a cartoon called The Tick? And he was like,
yes, I remember the Tick.
And then when the Tick would jump from building to building, he'd like smash through things and just leave this trail of destruction behind him. That's what I felt like Quasimodo should have been. It's just like he's like, he's swinging, and he's like, and just like pulling things off. And like,
That's a little bit Quasi. That's a little bit Quasi.
I love that, though. Thank you for mentioning that. I had a note to go back to Paris, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because Ryan and I have not been.
Gotta go.
And so, did you feel that when you went to the cathedral? Did you feel like the presence of it?
Oh, yeah.
Not of God, but just, we felt that in Italy. Some of the cathedrals we saw in Italy. And there's a scene when she first goes into the church and it's silent and you kind of hear singing in the distance. And it reminds me of the cathedral we went to in Bologna. And there's just something, whether you're religious or not, there's just something about walking into a space like that.
Well,
I couldn't agree more.
In those times or earlier, nowadays, I can see really cool stuff on my phone, and I've played video games and, been on a roller coaster. But back then, that had to be like the coolest thing you'd ever experienced.
Oh, yeah.
And one of those churches, it's just like,
totally.
Yeah.
You walk
into
these.
Feel the presence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are these moments you just see something that's man-made or human-made that literally takes your breath away, and it's like that. What those people in that in the 1800s in Victor Hugo's time must have experienced walking into Notre Dame. It just literally must have been breathtaking.
Well, now this is about the movie, so I feel like I'm not on a big tangent. But the Notre Dame looked like so much taller, like cartoonishly taller than anything.
Yeah.
Is it? But I feel like I've heard that now buildings get big like that, but like back then, was that how big it was compared to everything else, or is that just
well, I think it was huge, but I think obviously Disney was sort of making a concerted effort to show not just its sort of oversized influence in the city and obviously the story, but I really got the sense watching it that in this retelling of the story, the cathedral itself was bigger and more timeless than even this epic adventure, that it had stood long before Quasimodo lived there. It's going to stand long after Quasimodo has now left the cathedral. It's just a sort of semi-permanent part of this world.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that they spent some time in Paris, in France, the animators, like they usually do for these films. They go and they spend some time to do different sketches and get references and things like that. And I know they also looked back. I don't know if it's Victor Hugo who actually sketched. I don't know if he did drawings in his book, but they looked at drawings from that time as well, and paintings and things like that.
Very
so I think they tried to incorporate all of that. But we find out that today is the Festival of Fools, the Feast of Fools. They kind of refer to it as both. And, we get this scene to see how gentle Quasimodo is with the bird who wants to fly but is nervous, and like right
John
from
was like,
there,
I'm already crying.
yeah,
I was already crying.
I felt the same thing where he was like,
yeah,
if I could fly. And then I love the bit
and it's
where
like,
he just
this is
moves
such a
his
good
hands
day.
and the bird
Yeah, it's like if you were teaching a kid how to ride a bike and they don't realize you're not holding on to the back of the seat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
fell in love with Quasimodo. Right.
Yes.
I know, they do such a good job of the moment we really meet him for the first time, you're like, oh, he's not a monster. Like, they just completely win our hearts immediately.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah, you're on his side. I wrote here, I love Laverne and all the birds around her. I forgot that they always land on her. And that's just something I really like.
My controversial, quote unquote, take with this is I feel like there were some elements of this movie that were too Disney to me. And I feel like if they had felt a little more confident in their darker material, they're like, we're going to release a PG animated movie about this. I mean, the Hugo and Victor and Hugo could have been out of the movie. Like, he's like, cut the cheese. Like, I'm like,
he has a lot of more like topical 90s jokes in there.
Cheesy.
That make it a little less timeless.
Genie.
Yeah.
And I think that was the part that I was kind of like, get rid of this and like dive more into the complexity of these characters.
Yeah, I really like Laverne, but she's got a couple of those jokes, I guess, too.
Hers were, not as topical.
Yeah, they made it, well, except for the Wizard of Oz one. But that's topical, as in, like, the Wizard of Oz is from 1939. So
what I'm saying is, I did not laugh at a lot of their stuff, but I was like, it's a big juxtaposition against how dark this movie goes.
And they wanted them to lighten it up, but I do agree with you that at some point, sometimes it didn't feel appropriate. In the beginning, it's not so bad, but there are points later in the film where it's a little bit of a harsh contrast.
Yeah,
and so they're encouraging him, and they encourage him throughout this whole movie. They're pushing him to go to the festival. Like, you just sneak out one time, it's okay. Like, Frollo will never know you've been there, just to say that you've done it. And he kind of just wants to experience life outside of the cathedral for one day, and then he'll go back to his life, is kind of his opinion on it. And so then we meet Frollo. I mean, we've met him because we saw him in the beginning of the story.
We get to see
how he interacts with Quasimodo. And he demeans him from moment one. Like, from moment one, he has what we call go away heat, and we'll explain that more to John. Because it's in our villain rating. But he immediately is cruel to Quasimodo, shows him no love, shows him no kindness, and is just like, he's the kind of person that tears apart your self-esteem. Like, it is the only reason why Quasimodo has any ounce of self-esteem is because he has the gargoyles, truly.
Yes.
Like, and maybe any interactions with the archdeacon, but we never actually see them interact with one another. So I don't know that the archdeacon
Once again, the church potentially complicit in the atrocities performed on others.
Yeah. So
talk about hot takes.
Hot take.
No, he's manipulative AF. You know, he knows exactly how to keep not just Quasimodo but everybody under his thumb.
Yeah, and even when he has lunch with him, remember he's reviewing the alphabet, and it's like abomination, and then it keeps going and it gets worse.
Yes,
and he calls him master.
We're about to get a curse word here that I may or may not quack out, but at least D, damnation, E, eternal damnation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, and then it gets to F, and it should be forgiveness,
festival,
but he says festival because he's thinking about the festival.
Yeah.
And then he tells him his heartless mother abandoned you. So now we find out that he, like most villains, has spun the story, to what it's very much
to
like Scar.
Validate himself.
Twisting the story on how, Mufasa died. And,
just
so
like a dictator.
Exactly. You have to stay in here. You're a monster. And then that's where we start hearing that song, and then it turns into Out There. So it starts with him kind of singing and repeating the phrases like, he's no good, he's a monster, he's all these things. And then he sings Out There, and it's such a good song.
Oh,
like, even
it's
if
just
you don't want to watch,
timeless.
Yeah. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, just go YouTube this.
Just watch and listen to this song. There's no better. There's just no better. I'm sure you all have talked about in your other podcast episodes the sort of I want songs. Like Ariel's part of your world, right? Like the hero often has these kind of moments, but there's just something eternal and timeless about Quasimodo's Out There, where like every one of us, and me having listened to that when I was like a little gay teenage John the Bombard, it's just there's something so just, I don't know what, inspiring, beautiful. It's just timeless.
Well, it's a lot about like not, like this is a diminishing of the theme, but like or lack of self-confidence, or this feeling that everyone's
Yes.
gonna, he's got a little more reason to believe they will actually turn on him. But I think that's something that, it is communal or global, or something that we all deal with at some point.
Well,
to varying degrees.
wanting to go out, and explore, or to like.
Yeah,
I think we all have that feeling of like being afraid to do something, but also feeling like we have to do
if
it.
only
right?
I could be normal enough. If only I could be somebody who would be the kind of person who could be accepted and do this. And talk about Quasimodo's courage in this story. He does that, gets thoroughly, basically assaulted, harassed, and embarrassed, and then still has the guts to go back out there.
Assaulted in a way that like was hard to watch.
Uncomfortable.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk real quick about his design, because I think he is one of the most interesting designed Disney-like heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not Phoebus. He's not conventionally good looking.
Not John Smith.
He's not John Smith. I know you love
my white bland piece of toast.
you love John Smith. But he's like, they did such a good job of beyond, like he's extraordinarily, like, he's vulnerable. He's got like one thing of teeth just there that looks very specific. His arms, like, he's clearly someone
very
who's been,
muscular.
He looks. There's parts later where like when he's holding up Phoebus, like when he's like, you have to put me down now. Like, I love that they portray him as not weak or timid. It's just.
His personality is shy and timid, but like he's a strength.
Wrestler. They said that
like,
we wanted him to look like a wrestler.
Totally.
I love it.
Yeah, no, I like his, and a lot of thought was put into his design as well.
Don't you think he has a lot of similarities to the Beast from the Disney Beauty and the Beast version? Like, he's just sort of this hulking mass of something.
It's funny because Quasimodo's, you may think maybe that it was where is this thing I'm going to say? You may think it would be the Beast, but actually the designer was James Baxter, who worked on Belle.
Oh.
Really?
Belle and Rafiki.
Interesting.
Wait, so, Belle, Rafiki, and Quasimodo. Fascinating.
Yes, those are his three. That's what he says.
I also have, going back to that, the guy from The New Yorker did some work on this, did illustrations.
The guy from the...
And now I can't find...
Hertzfield? The guy...
Pete DeSteve was...
Okay, so not the guy from
No, but
Aladdin.
he did a lot of thought into the design of Quasi and James Baxter. So they worked together, I read. So as we go back to the film, we cut to Phoebus. And so this is where we meet him for the first time. And he's entering town and he observes Esmeralda. This is where we see her for the first time too. And she's dancing with her goat for money. And you hear like women throughout this film, they are not referred to as Romani or Roma or anything like that. And so, you hear...
By the good guys and the bad guys.
Yes, and by themselves. They refer to themselves as that as well. And so you hear a mother say, they're going to steal us blind. So already we've got this kind of stereotype from moment one is there. And then the guards kind of go after her and she gets away. And she gets away because he has his horse Achilles sit and heal. Achilles heal. Phoebus's horse on the guards.
Phoebus's sidekick is Achilles the horse. Esmeralda's sidekick is Jolly the goat. Who I figured out they have one set of hooped earrings between them because Jolly has one and Esmeralda has the other one the opposite ear.
So that's when they kind of meet for the first time, and then the captain meets Frollo, and when he's taken to meet Frollo is improving on someone's torturing technique, and we find out he's torturing the last captain.
Psycho.
So that was another moment I think I gasped. Yeah.
Like you can hear the sounds of the whips, and then Frollo gives him the advice to wait between whippings so that it hurts more.
So that the pain from the first one doesn't dull the sting of the next one.
Yes,
it's like,
terrible.
This dude is Disturbia. Like, this dude is truly Disturbia.
It's bad. So, then the captain, he starts describing why the captain's there. And he goes, so you summoned me from war to take care of this group of individuals. Again, we're going to refer to them by different names throughout this. And he gives the example of like 1 or 2 bugs that are crawling on concrete. And he's like, over 20 years, I've tried to take care of this problem, but
one by one.
Yeah, and smushes them. And then he lifts up this concrete block and there's like hundreds of ants. And he's like, but I believe that, they have this underground area.
For the record, this is direct Nazi propaganda. Like they have this similarities have been used probably also on the Romani since the Third Reich took they were in part of the genocide.
I bet this kind of evil characterization, I bet that resurfaces time and again throughout history.
Yeah, and then he smashes it, and then Phoebus says something about making the point of like you visually made your point. I get it. And so that's kind of how we see that. And then it goes into Topsy-Turvy Day, the song. And Clopin sings this song. And this is when we find out that the Feast of Fools, the Festival of Fools, is all about, and I have one like quick blurb on how it was described when I didn't do a huge deep dive, but it was a popular festival in the Middle Ages because it basically was you would elect a false bishop or a false priest for the day. So the low and the high officials trade places. So that was the whole idea behind it. And it was probably to keep the commoners happy, like give them something. That would be
pacification, mollification.
Yeah, that would be my like quick take on it without doing a lot of reading. And
that's
research.
Interesting that was the point of that festival, though, because, and I wonder, I cannot remember for the life of me what happens in the Victor Hugo novel, but in the Victor Hugo novel, as in some of the other adaptations, Frollo is the archdeacon or the archbishop of Notre Dame. He's in charge of the cathedral. So I wonder if the Festival of Fools was originally conceived in the story as one. If Quasimodo won, did he get to change places with Frollo or something in the original story?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll figure that out. I'll research that.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what we see here. And Quasi's getting thrown all around. It's very hectic and chaotic. It's anytime you've ever been to a festival. And because he's kind of experiencing everything. And then Esmeralda, he kind of goes into her tent accidentally and she thinks he's wearing a mask. And she's so nice to him. And then right as he leaves, she says, "Great mask." And he smiles. But like my heart sunk for him there.
Yeah.
But
Same.
like I think he's just so happy to be at the festival. And she was so kind to him. And then they nominate, we find out that the way that they're going to choose a king of fools is who makes the ugliest face. And so then they realize that it's not a mask that he's wearing, it is his face. But Clopin here turns the crowd around and says, this is what it's all about. And then the crowd is very positive. He turns it around later the other way, but he turns it around here.
I just felt a little patronizing. He's like, we said we wanted the ugliest person. Here he is. Like,
yeah.
Like, thanks, Clopin.
Yeah.
You suck.
I kind of will say I took Clopin there as being a little bit more of a helper.
I did too. I took
He's
him.
The ruler. The
I know Ryan's got the hot take on it. I took him as a little bit more helpful there as well. And I wrote here we get to see we get to see Quasi experience joy and love and celebrating, like everyone's lifting him up, like, and that end scene where they end with the confetti and he's got the crown on his head and he's just smiling from ear to ear, like it's such a joyful moment. And then the guards start throwing tomatoes at him. And at first it's just the guards, but then all the townspeople and everybody joins in and gets in on it. And then they throw ropes over him and they tie him down.
And tie him down.
And Frollo is watching it all happen and he's calling out to him and saying, "Master, basically help me." And and then Phoebus even says,
"Let me stop
this cruelty." Like actually says the word cruelty. And he goes, "Just in a moment, a lesson needs to be learned here." So it's very clear that Frollo is like, "I told you not to go outside. And now you're going to see what happens when you do go outside," essentially. And it's Esmeralda who stands up and helps him.
That's how I feel about getting back from this pandemic, is I'm going to go outside and that's what's going to happen to me. It's just tie him down. That's why I'm so nervous to leave the house.
But
Don't worry,
at this
Ryan.
point, Frollo says silence and she screams justice and John screamed preach. And
I was like,
delightful.
girl, preach.
Yes, it's so good.
This is a big GIF that gets used in a lot.
Someone
of,
just used it for us on the Facebook page.
But it gets used for like in a lot of like political posts and things like that.
Yeah,
because nothing says take my political side more seriously than a Disney GIF.
I know, but it was a powerful moment. I feel like when you're watching the film, it is a
well,
very powerful moment.
As an audience, we just immediately, if we didn't already, we just effing love Esmeralda. Like, she is speaking truth to power. The only one, maybe besides Phoebus, but not really even Phoebus at this point. She's really the only one who is undeterred and not frightened of this cruel power, that's ruling Paris.
Yeah, she's not afraid to stand up. And even when all the guards go around her and she's counting them, she's like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 of you and 1 of me. And then, so it's this whole chase sequence that happens here. And then we see, it's not exactly Old Man Jafar, but it's very close.
No, like people say, like, this is the Jafar.
Yeah, it looks like him.
Your voice sounds less like him than anything else.
And he's in a cage. And then he goes, I'm free. And then he gets in the shackles? The stockade. And he goes, dang it. And then later on, he falls in a sewer after he gets a Monsieur.
That's a good bit.
So that happens way later on at the end. But the chase scene happens through the square. And we then see that Esmeralda kind of sneaks away and walks into the church. And that's where we get that really breathtaking, beautiful moment of her in this quiet space, and Phoebus sneaks up on her and they kind of have this fight, but it's kind of flirtatious as well, and they're kind of sussing each other out because she thinks he's there to take her, and Frollo comes in and he's like, you need to take her, and he's like, you need to say sanctuary, and she thinks Phoebus is tricking her, and then he just flat out says, she said sanctuary, I can't do anything to her. And then that's when the archdeacon steps in, and that's when we said the church in this rendition are the good guys here. They're protecting her, which in the original, that's not necessarily the case, since Frollo is the archdeacon.
Did I mention that the archdeacon is voiced by David Ogden Stiers, who did Cogsworth?
I don't think you have on the podcast. We talked about it when we watched it. Yeah. Also, this is the moment where Frollo sniffs her hair.
This was the moment where we all were like, "Oh,
yeah!"
And I did not
remember. He says,
"I'm
imagining a rope around your neck,
like
around your
that
pretty, beautiful neck."
No.
Oh,
yeah, it's
good
awful.
Lord. And it's like, where the heck did the archdeacon go? Like, someone get back in here and intervene in this horribly disgusting moment.
This is some real incel stuff going on with Frollo.
Yeah,
here.
And then after that happens, then the archdeacon is essentially like, maybe there's someone here who can help you. Like, basically telling her, like, maybe, like, go to God. He doesn't say that, like,
that's what
word
I said.
for word.
I said Jesus Christ.
You said, let Jesus into your heart.
Well, and I'll say this. I, as somebody who both grew up Catholic and is now not religious in any real sense of the word, I will say, for a Disney movie to sort of tell this part of the story where she's, it's basically a beautiful song and it's a beautiful prayer she's asking, right, on behalf of her people, on behalf of all outcasts. I do think they did a really good job of making her prayer a more universal, sort of like appeal to a higher power, not to any particular religion or denomination. Obviously, we know what religion it is. We know where she is. But there was something, and maybe this is very much my own subjective preference when I'm thinking about, higher powers, but I think the movie does a great job of making any audience member almost feel a connection to her as somebody who is not calling on Jesus in particular or a Christian version of God necessarily, but she just finds herself locked in this place that's dedicated to a higher power, and she is calling for help from this higher power on behalf of people other than herself. And that's still something that I think makes us root for her and hope that, her prayer gets answered.
And I think, for me, what resonated is the last line in the song, which is, I thought we were all the children of God.
I wrote down in my notes, she kind of challenges God a little bit in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like that a lot. And I think,
I don't know why I'm coming off so, antagonistic to the church today.
Oh, no, that's fine.
No, you can be antagonistic.
Basically,
when there's a Methodist villain in a future Disney movie, you guys can come after me.
No, that's fine. I think with me,
will.
because I will say, I think we're all comfortable saying this. John already said this. Ryan and I are not religious. I consider myself spiritual, and if you want to have that conversation with me,
let's do it.
Reach me offline. But what I will say is I like that line because I think lots of people, no matter what your background is, if you grew up religious or if you have a very strong sense of faith, I think you grapple with how faith challenges you if you're not living a lifestyle
Yes.
it's deemed quote unquote appropriate, you know?
Well said.
And I know
Yep.
John and I grew up Catholic, so I can, I know that experience, but I know there are many people that experience that with many different religions. And so that line like really called to me in that way.
A moment ago,
Totally.
you said, come at you if you want to talk about your spirituality. Just a reminder, it's 707 yo TRPD1. That's our hotline if you want to call, leave a voice message. 707 yo TRPD1.
I don't mean come at me, attack me, but if you're curious what I mean versus spirituality versus religious, I mean, I'm not the only person to use that term, but yeah, so I don't know, but I agree with you, John. I find the song to be strong, and I think it's a very inclusive song that I
Yes,
think
that's a good word for
could
it.
be
I agree.
used in a lot of different ways depending on your
Who
background.
you are and
connect
yeah,
with
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so after she sings that, Quasimodo kind of hears her singing this song and finds her, and she goes to find him. He runs away. He's kind of embarrassed for her to find him. And then that's when she sees, we didn't talk about this earlier, but he has wood carved the entire town. So
Like
he's
Beetlejuice.
yeah, like Beetlejuice, but in a
God, it
sweeter
is
way.
Beetlejuice.
But and I mean, I guess it starts out sweet in Beetlejuice because it's what's his name who builds the town,
yeah,
and then Beetlejuice takes over it.
I think he's just doing it just because he likes doing things. I don't think there's any sweetness to it, but I don't think it's not sweet. Like he's just a meticulous. He likes detail. I don't think he's doing it because he loves the town, whereas Quasimodo's doing it to
I was confused at who you were talking about.
Quasimodo does it because he can't be down there. And it's also
it's
going
a way
back to
that he feels like he's a part of the town.
It's also going back, like, he's playing the part you were saying, John, of, like, the overlooking Notre Dame. Like, he's like, oh, I see the baker. She goes, oh, my gosh, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so.
And he was embarrassed because they weren't painted yet.
Yeah.
And she immediately knew who they were by the way they were carved.
Right. And then Jolly starts eating the sheep.
Yeah, and then
you're
all
like,
the sheep
stop,
are
make him
gone.
stop.
Jolly eats all the sheep and the sheep herder before he's done. But
love him.
so then he shows her the bells, and they all have names, and I love that.
I
Big
thought
Marie,
the whole
and I love that whole scene.
Very
between
charming.
Them.
Very
Yeah.
charming. I think in the book Quasimodo is deaf because of the bell ringing. I just remembered that detail when we were watching
just
that.
pile it on.
I mean,
I know.
I mean, it would make sense. No human should be that close to bells. They really they
totally.
just shouldn't. But
That'd be a funny, like, thing. It's like, Quasimodo, I've come to... What? Like, he's just like, what? He's just not deaf. He's just hard of hearing.
So the whole time that they're up there with the bells, the grotesques, the gargoyles, are trying to hear what they're saying. And they say, what's he saying? Frollo has a long nose. You loved that joke.
I love any jokes that are like...
Misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding what the like... You have a problem with your hearing. Oh, I'm not really into jewelry. What? I thought you said I'd look good with an earring or something like that. I love those stupid jokes.
So he winds up helping her climb down the cathedral because the guards are everywhere, and she wants to get back to the Court of Miracles, and she wants to take Quasimodo with her, and he's not, after everything that happened with the crowd, he's not super comfortable. So this is when she gives him a talisman, kind of like a necklace, and she's basically like, you hold the city in the palm of your hand when you have this, and that plays into it later. We find out what that means. But then let's talk about the guard who has the only French accent. Check the alley.
Check the alley. Like,
is the one French accent we hear in the whole
that,
movie.
and when Hugo is singing that song and compares him to a croissant, he says croissant. Other than that, that's like
so the Paris studio that once had done some work on a Goofy movie, they did 10 minutes of animation in this movie. I thought was interesting. One other little fact I want to throw in here, since it's right above that one. 72. That can't be right. It's got to be 7,200. It's either 7,200 or 72,000 pencils were used in this movie.
That's a big difference, but I would probably imagine it's the second one.
2,000 bags of potato and tortilla chips were consumed. Also, was another fact that was given.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Here, I did want to make another note, John. You mentioned the musical adaptation earlier with the opening, but we started talking about Ryan was curious if the gargoyles were manifestations of, like, if they were in Quasimodo's mind, or in this Disney
Tyler
film,
Durden.
they more appear magical almost, because like he can see them but nobody else can, but then the goat sees them for like 1 minute. But I didn't know if you wanted to talk at all anymore about the adaptation of the musical or how they're used in that.
Well,
at
yeah,
all.
and they're in the musical. I honestly can't remember if it's the same take as the Disney adaptation where I think we're meant to believe they are magical because they interact with the goat. They also interact at some point when, at the end at the siege of the cathedral. But I can't remember if I will just say, to Ryan's earlier point, it would be interesting to see an adaptation, and I don't honestly remember if the musical does this, where they take they embrace a little bit more the dark and the adult themes here, where it'd be very interesting to see, an adaptation that had the grotesques, but we come to learn they were fully in Quasimodo's head, and they were sort of a manifestation of a struggle that he was having internally that nobody else could interact with.
I think you can also have them, because it doesn't have to be a sign of any sort of like mental illness or anything.
No, he could
legitimately, like, if someone's like, he's like, I live here by myself. Sometimes I talk, like, listen, when Tara's gone away for the weekend, Lady gets an earful. Like, that's all I'm saying.
And to have somebody who's raised by Frollo, like, I mean, you're gonna have to have some mental coping mechanisms,
because I don't think they bring him to any realizations he couldn't have gotten to himself. Like, they kind of help his confidence and push him to do stuff. But, like, I think he was
already feeling that way somewhat.
They're not, like, revealing any information he doesn't know or anything.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And then we go to Heaven's Light, which is such a beautiful song. And John mentioned that he sang it in a voice lesson.
I did. I could not get the falsetto exactly, but yeah.
And then it cuts to chanting in the church. And we see this stained glass, and then it cuts to Frollo and the transition between the two songs of Heaven's Light and Hellfire. And this burning desire turning me to sin. Actual quote, his burning desire for Esmeralda.
Yeah,
so
this
that is
guy
what he is truly struggling with.
He is troubled.
Very visually beautiful scene, though, like with all the you said it seemed very Fantasia-esque in spots, but there is the part where the guard interrupts him to say something, and you were like, did he hear him singing?
Yeah, he just knocks on the door in the middle of this really intense moment in the song, and he's like, what does he even say? Something about they couldn't find Esmeralda.
Yeah, she's escaped the cathedral.
Yeah. Which felt like, knock if you come in here. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again, sir.
And then he gives the kind of ultimatum, destroy her or let her be mine, when he's like talking to
that was his
God,
prayer, his version of the prayer, his gross version of the prayer that Esmeralda did,
and of Heaven's Light, the opposite of Heaven's Light.
I think they're presented on the same track in the album.
I think they are too.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so then we cut to the next day, and Frollo looks hungover. His eyes are like red, and he just looks like he's had a night.
We've all been there, girl.
I had a theory of what he'd been doing, but I don't think it's appropriate for the podcast.
It's not.
This is a family-friendly podcast, Ryan.
Yeah, and he basically just says, I had a little trouble with the fireplace.
That's also... Like, here's the thing. Let's imagine that you just sang a song and the fire came alive and then there were those big hooded judges. Would you go right to sleep?
That's a good point. Yeah, good point. So he basically starts locking everyone up, and he's bribing everyone with like 10 pieces of silver if they'll tell him where Esmeralda is, and nobody will give in.
Do they get to 30?
I think they get to 20.
Okay.
I think he offers 20, and then he goes to the family with the windmill.
Yes, that's right.
And...
Good Lord.
Then he tells them they're under house arrest, and then he puts like arrow or something through the door so they can't open the door, spear through the door, and then instructs Phoebus to set it on fire. And then this is where he adamantly is like, no, I will not do this. And then Frollo sets the house on fire. Phoebus goes in, saves the kid, and then he is sentenced to death. And so they go to behead Phoebus, and Esmeralda throws a rock at Frollo's horse, which distracts the horse. Phoebus gets away, takes the horse, but then falls from a very high height into the water. Mm-hmm. And Esmeralda saves him. And I said later on in the film that I do like that each of the kind of heroic characters save one another.
Yeah.
Like, it's not always one character saving the other one. Like, Esmeralda has now saved Quasimodo and Phoebus. Phoebus saves Esmeralda by claiming sanctuary. Quasimodo gets her to the Court of Miracles. Like, there's a lot of intertwining, and it continues to happen throughout the film. So I do like that.
Good
then it
teamwork.
Cuts to very good teamwork. And then it cuts to Paris on fire.
Yeah,
So
he
then
is
it's
gone.
like you just see
actually
all of
burned down
Paris
Paris.
burning.
Yeah.
He is making good on his earlier threat to burn down all of Paris if he can't find her.
Yes. And it's happening. And then it cuts to the Gargoyles being upset about because they haven't seen Esmeralda and the song A Guy Like You, which I will say it doesn't really fit
Yeah.
with what's currently happening. I understand.
And it wasn't so good. Like it everything else drove the plot or like gave us motivation. This was a offshoot that went, she really likes you, and then immediately it's like, no, she doesn't. And it was like, why do we have
I almost
this
feel like
song?
if the song happened earlier in the film, like after they had the conversation and he helps her escape.
Just cut it. Let's
I
get
agree.
rid of some goofy
Yeah,
stuff.
I think they could have cut it or they could have put it earlier in the film, but it's kind of weirdly placed.
They just wanted Friend Like Me. I feel like a lot of this stuff that's so Disney and so specific is a bad attempt to capture some magic.
Stick
they'd
with the
gotten
formula.
Aladdin.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So she winds up coming back late at night at the end of the song asking for help, but she's got Phoebus. Phoebus is hurt. He's basically passed out, and she keeps calling him my friend and is like, please take care of him, my friend. And then he overhears Phoebus wakes up and talks about, she's like, that arrow almost got your heart. And he's like, well... And there's like that moment where he lays it on thick and they kiss. And then
John went and got a tub of ice cream and started eating it with a spoon and was like, I'm single!
I silently barfed into my bag next to me. It was like,
and then they just make out in front of him.
Quasimodo basically silently sob. Which is such a hard, like, tears are streaming down his face.
Yes, and he has like a mental song play and he's like...
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that was their... You know, God love it. It's a Disney movie, so you can't hate moments like that too much. But that was obviously like the first part of a 2-part Quasimodo reacting to the two of them that are, I think, we as an audience are meant to believe by the end that, you know, that was a journey. That was the start of Quasimodo's journey. Watching the two of them fall in love.
Yeah, accepting that they care for one another. Wanting her to be happy.
I think it was weird they were making fun of Quasimodo. What happened to the dude that carried Phoebus in? He just kind of like disappeared for that scene. That he shows up later when they're like, you gotta get out of here.
Yeah. So then Frollo comes for Quasi and just wants to have lunch with him. And this is where he's very manipulative. And Quasi's so nervous and he's dropping things because Phoebus is under the table. He's hidden Phoebus. So Phoebus is under the table. And he basically blames Quasi for burning Paris. He's like, if you just gave her to me, this wouldn't be, like, you did all this, which is terrible. And so he winds up burning the figure he's carved of Esmeralda and says, we'll get her one way or another. I know where the hideout is, and I'm planning to attack at dawn. He doesn't know where the hideout is, but he knows that Quasi will lead him to the hideout, basically.
I was just going to say, talk about a typical manipulative tyrant that he finds a way to make his victims believe it is their fault for the horrible things he's perpetrating.
Exactly, yeah. And also just, would that be... Is gaslighting the right term as far as
that's
like
exactly
him
the right
saying
term.
Paris is burning and you did all of this?
Yeah, that
and
would.
That part, yeah. Just like that whole piece too is just so ugly. And if you've ever interacted with somebody who does that, and I can say I have, it really does a number on you. So like the fact that Quasimodo is like standing and kind and sweet and helpful, like it
it's beyond manipulative.
Yeah, it takes it to another level. And so I wrote...
Hold on one sec. John, are you okay?
Yeah, I just bit my lip.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
You've been doing that, and I was like... First I thought you were like getting something, like a little dab, and I was like, he's doing this a lot. Is he okay?
I missed my face with my White Claw, and I bit my lip. This is the danger. This is the you better keep this in the podcast.
Oh, God. So I like the scene with Quasi and Phoebus. I like that they kind of like they're still butting heads here because they're fighting about like because Phoebus is basically like, you're just gonna stay here, she's your friend, like why won't you go out and help her? And he kind of pushes him to be like, you need to help her. Phoebus goes, and then Quasi like startles him because he swings down and swings in, and then they have this argument about what the talisman means, and he's like, no, I'm up there, this is the city, this is looking at the city from up high.
I think
and
there's
I like
a lot
that
of
interaction.
Well, there's a lot of interpersonal relation. There's a lot of characters like that are main. It's so instead of it just being good guy love interest, bad guy, now it's good guy love interest, another, there's a full love triangle,
Yeah.
but everybody gets their time. Like there's the Phoebus storyline gets a good time to shine. Esmeralda, Phoebus gets good time. Quasimodo, Esmeralda. Everybody
all
gets
of them
some
get
time.
the three of them.
I
and
kind
the
of want
two
to
of
see
them.
more of the two. I wanted to see a little bit more. Honestly, I really had fun watching Quasimodo and Phoebus together. It was like a buddy comedy a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved I think I said this, but when he's holding him up and you're a tight shot and you don't realize, like, he's like, now put me down. And then it zooms out and Quasimodo has him, like, in the air.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
that's when he's looking for Esmeralda.
I love all the scenes of Quasimodo being a physical threat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because they do a good job of, I think they do that in the horror movies where he's like a physical threat and an actual monster. And this one, it's like, you forget too, the audience, that he's super strong.
Well,
Yes.
and even Frollo, because Frollo's belittled him, he doesn't see him as a threat until the very end. When
Yep,
he
100%.
when Quasimodo has enough confidence to be like, no, I am worth it. I am a good person. Like, I'm not going to listen to what you're saying. But he doesn't ever see him as a threat.
I do say this is a Disney movie, and it probably would never happen. But there was part of me that wanted him to pick Frollo up and throw him.
That's what happens.
Darth Vader him off.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happens in the book and even in the musical adaptation. He picks it. Can I just spoil the musical a little bit for everybody?
Yes,
Is that
go
okay?
right ahead.
Should I do that? You just cut it if it's not okay. But at the end of the musical, the grotesques, which again I can't really remember if they're in his head or if they're magical in the musical. At the end, Quasimodo, Esmeralda actually dies in the other adaptations and in the book, so spoiler. But anyway, Quasimodo picks up Frollo, and Frollo says to him, "You don't want to hurt me." And in the background, the grotesques say, "Yes, you do." And he throws him off the cathedral and kills him. And it's like,
wow,
yes.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yep. Mm-hmm. Kind of dark, dark.
Yeah.
So as they're looking for where the Court of Miracle is, they're in this graveyard, and then John says, "I love a graveyard."
I love a graveyard moment.
Love a graveyard moment.
Great. All the movies you see where they were like they're like, let's go make out in the graveyard, and I'm like, who actually does that? John.
I have no comment. This is why I can't get a second date, Ryan.
So we go into the catacombs.
You need to find a nice grave digger.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So we go into the catacombs, and Phoebus is very suspicious because he's like, we should have been caught by now. Like, something's going on here, like, or it's a trap. And then Clopan's revealed, and he says it's good news tonight. This is where Clopan gets
that was a
really,
good joke. I did like that joke.
But he does get really dark here because now he's turned on them because he's like, I see you found our hideout, but you're not going to be staying very long because we are the judge, jury, and executioner here, and you've been tried, essentially. And because he calls them Frollo spies, and I guess from Clopan's point of view, he doesn't necessarily know.
Don't
all
side
the help.
with this guy. You
He
don't need
doesn't-
to. No one needs to defend
I'm just
him.
saying he doesn't necessarily know all the help.
Clopan doesn't really
Esmeralda.
take the time to get the information that may be
he
required
doesn't.
to make
He
a good
reacts
decision here.
too quickly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Esmeralda saves them again. Is basically like, no, they've been helping me. They're good people. And then when she thanks Phoebus, he goes, no, you really have to thank Quasimodo.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives Quasimodo this moment of being like, no, he's really the one who got us here and figured everything
Yeah.
out. And then Trollo. Trap Frollo is what I have in my notes. Trollo shows up and is like, Quasimodo led me here. So he's trying to get everyone to believe that, like, Quasi was in on it.
I'm glad that they didn't really push that part
yeah,
of it.
nobody
I hate
really
that
believed
movies.
that. Nobody seemed to believe that.
Totally.
He just said it. And then it cuts to him setting Esmeralda on fire for witchcraft. So it then just cuts to her, like,
Things have
basically being burned at
escalated
the stake.
very quickly, yes.
Yeah, so she's sentenced to death. And then he looks at her and says, you can choose me or the fire. And she basically spits in his face. And then he shouts to the crowd, she won't repent. I was like, well, you didn't really give her, like, I don't know that I'd call that repenting, like you or the fire. But yeah, so that happens. And then it cuts to Quasimodo chained up, which is another just like sad moment. So many chains. And again, where's the Archdeacon in all of this?
He was out front being like, hey, get off my lawn.
Yeah, but like, go check on Quasimodo. And then he gets the strength. He sees what's happening to Esmeralda. He breaks the chain. She rappels down, and he saves her. And then I got teary and like cried
when he holds her up and yells,
in front of the
screams
stained
sanctuary.
glass and screams sanctuary. Yeah, it was a very emotional, very powerful
The animation
moment.
in that moment was part of that must have been one of their like kind of innovative for that time scenes, because I just was struck by both that moment, the swelling music, and the animation of that stained glass window was just truly still stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm interested because I haven't seen Tarzan to see how much of like him going around and swinging through vines, like there's any similarities between this animation and that.
I never really thought about it. We'll have to,
Yeah.
So that's when I'm Free falls in the sewer happens. I have that in my notes.
Yeah.
the old guy, old man Jafar. And then this whole fight sequence where the guards go after the townspeople, but the townspeople are fighting back. It was reminiscent to me of Beauty and the Beast. It wasn't the exact same thing, but when all the inanimate objects kind of fight the town and the mob, it had a little bit of a similar feel every moment in there. And then that's when Laverne sends all the birds, fly my pretties, and you hear the Wicked Witch of the West theme in there.
Totally. I mean, it just. I think that's just.
Play?
Yeah, it played.
Yes, it's like
wow. I wonder how they got that.
It's like a perfect moment. So weird and so perfect.
And so basically, the grotesques are all, trying. They're like, Hugo chews a bunch of rocks and spits them out like bullets, and so they're like trying to fight off the guards. Everyone's fighting off the guards. And then lava starts pouring out of the cathedral.
So,
he like has molten or boiling something.
It's molten lead.
I
think it's got to be. Yeah, I think that's got to be. I'm not sure if he does it, but I think at the top of the cathedral they must just have dry. And I honestly, I think they explain this maybe a little bit more clearly in the musical adaptation. But yeah, I think it's molten lead for the bell creation.
For the bells, yeah.
And
so that makes more sense.
And
but
the
amount that comes out and the fact that it like
it's quite a volcano.
Pours out of the cathedral and all over to the bottom. Yeah. So then Frollo comes running. The archdeacon tries to save him. He gets pushed out of the way.
Stop.
Yeah. And then Esmeralda here, Ryan's like, wait, she doesn't die, does she? And John and I stayed silent.
Yeah.
Sit tight,
she's
Ryan.
Not responding. Yeah, Quasimodo's trying to wake her up to say, you need to see what's happening. Like, all the people are coming together and rebelling and all this. And then that's when Frollo comes in with a knife behind his back.
God.
And the shadows here and the knife and the shadows give it away. Quasimodo looks up at the shadow and sees that he's about to stab him. And this is when he fights back. Esmeralda wakes up at this time. And now they're out on a ledge. Quasimodo takes Esmeralda. They're out on a ledge. Frollo finds them, and it's kind of this back and forth. And then this is when he shares, I killed your mother.
In the same Scar thing where I'm like...
Yes, very similar to what Scar does.
And here's my
Simba
little secret.
Yes, yeah. And so it does the opposite of what I think. I think the villains say it to tear down the hero, but instead it gives the hero the like confidence and the power to be like, F you. Like
tried and true.
Yeah. So Quasi's falling, Esmeralda's got him, and then Frollo's like on another gargoyle, essentially, right? It's like this whole
there's this
thing.
Whole thing where when he ends up, he comes at Esmeralda and with just like
wild eyes,
like
fiery eyes.
Yeah, and
Psycho.
then the gargoyle he's on cracks and he starts to fall, and then the gargoyle like makes a face at him.
Yeah, like it
which
lights
I didn't know
up.
if was just like artistic or something, or if
the
it was
lava
like
was
they were all alive.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that could be any version of like either I don't know if as an audience we're or even if there's any intention there beyond like either the cathedral actually is somehow animate and is fighting back to defend, to protect Quasimodo, or if it's just I think also part of this is Frollo is just gone and irredeemable at this part, and he is just. That could just be in Frollo's mind that he saw that because he's just so effing crazy at this point.
That's very true. Yeah, he's completely lost it.
I want to know what Frollo's exit strategy is from this. If he kills these people, like, are you crazy? What do you think's going to happen to you if you kill? You just must be so far gone.
He was so, crazed that I don't even know that crossed his mind, but he falls from a very high height. We see him fall pretty much all the way
into
until
lava.
nothing. Yeah, into the lava.
In which then the lava just disappears. Don't worry so much about the lava.
Yeah, but as Quasimodo falls, Esmeralda can't hold him, and Phoebus saves Quasimodo.
Yeah.
So again, everybody's saving each other. And this is, we're like, friendship here. But they all save one another. And I do like that because we've noticed in other films where it's like one character is always saving the other and not vice versa. Esmeralda brings him out into the crowd because they're all cheering for Phoebus and Esmeralda. Obviously, Quasimodo is very hesitant. He's in the shadows. He doesn't want to come out. And a little girl comes out of the crowd and kind of touches his face and then gives him a hug. And Ryan was very put off that she touched him.
That's kind of a strange. It is kind of strange.
It is a strange. Yes. She could have just hugged him. Yeah.
I'm gonna do that when I see you again, John.
Okay, good. Well, I really look forward to that.
And then who was it? It might have been both of you who said the children shall lead the way.
Yes.
So it ends on the song it opened with, which is the Bells of Notre Dame, and it zooms out to the cityscape, and we kind of go through the clouds, and we see, as we said, the cathedral is like almost as tall as the clouds, the way that it kind of zooms out, and that's the end. So we did it.
So we have our questions we ask at the end of everyone. We'll do this, and then we'll do the villains ranking. How was the princess? Which the princess in this case would be Quasimodo.
Yeah, I think so.
I loved him. I think I talked about the design of him and how endearing he was. It was easy to feel on his side.
I agree. I think we've gushed on him throughout the film, but I really liked him a lot.
I think he had such a gentle soul.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say. Pure of heart. And as I think, Tara, you talked about at the beginning of the episode, unusual to have a truly startling physical depiction of our hero, and yet from the very first moment we interact with him to the very last moment we interact with him, we're rooting for him all the way.
Yeah, and he's nothing but kind throughout.
Yeah.
How was the princess, or the prince in this case will be Esmeralda, maybe also Phoebus.
Yeah, I liked Esmeralda. She was very sassy. She had this spunk to her that I really liked. And we talked about how she's the only one who's not afraid to stand up for her people, for herself, for others who are being mistreated. She stands up for Quasimodo when nobody else will.
Yep. Oh, Esmeralda for president, like 2024. Like she is just true. She's the whole package.
I think there were some scenes where you kind of got like the male gaze look at her in a few cases.
And I think they showed it, like Phoebus when he first lays eyes on her.
I love Phoebus's line where he's like, "Look at that display," and he's like, "Yes, sir." Like I love that.
Sir.
Like, but there's definitely something a little bit with the animation, and it was intended because in the making of, all they do is just talk about how hot she is. Like,
that's uncomfortable.
Like, oh, that Esmeralda, and I'm like, oh, okay. But like I liked her a lot more than I thought I was going to, because I was like kind of expecting it to be this kind of male drawn version of female beauty, and I think they did so much more with her than just that.
And her facial expressions, I think the green eyes were a very good choice with the dark hair, because you're immediately like connected and you zone in on her.
And don't you
the way
think
her hair was done?
She's also got eyeshadow. I think that does something with it.
And don't you think Demi Moore did a great job? I just think it was understated and maybe not immediately noticeable, but I think Demi Moore did a great job of like this sort of gentle and yet firm when she had to be in strong vocal acting.
I agree.
Okay.
Ryan disagrees.
He's not a Demi.
Ryan's gonna okay.
I'd like Demi less.
Oh goodness.
Anyway,
right.
So if how are the sidekicks henchmen? I think we could have done without the gargoyles. I think they were okay, but I really think they pulled away from. I mean, I think they wanted it to feel like a Disney movie, and they wanted to get butts in seats, and that's how you do it in some cases in 1996.
Yeah.
But I would love to see this redone. Like, I would have liked to have seen the world we live in, where it's like, hi, we're Disney, we're going to do a little bit of a darker thing, and it's not going to be for kids this age anymore. It's going to be for a little bit older.
Yeah, and that's again, you guys should listen to the musical adaptation. I know I keep harping on it, but I do think that's sort of what I think the three of us, as we've been talking about it, might actually prefer, right? They take kind of the more adult, darker adaptation road of this, and including with the grotesques, and I think it kind of better serves what is inherently kind of a dark, tragic story.
Yeah.
Favorite musical number?
This is gonna be hard.
You got to pick one and only one, and all the other ones we're going to throw away.
No. I think it's gonna have
that's
to
really
be
hard.
out there for me.
Me too. I'm out there.
Is that his I Want song?
Mhm.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I don't remember that song
It's
at
so
all before
powerful. It's so powerful and it's so emotional. And as much as I loved Hellfire as a child, which is a weird statement to make now that I'm an adult and I've like really like listened to
We
the
always
words,
said that
but
about Tara growing up. We're like, Tara loves Hellfire.
loves
She
Hellfire.
loves self-flagellation over like lust. It's always been a fan of hers. It's just
But I did really like that song, and Heaven's Light is so beautiful. I think I liked the contrast between those two songs.
But can a runner-up also be Bells of Notre Dame? That is just that has got to be one of the best Disney openings of all time.
Yes, and that note.
So epic.
No, it's hard for me to pick just one. I agree with you. Bells of Notre Dame is
you only
another
get to pick
really
one.
good one.
That's
Out
it.
there,
Out
I
there.
think.
I'm
I have
going
to
on the
take
record.
over. What's
Yeah,
yours?
out there.
Out there too.
Out there, yeah.
Okay.
I again, I don't remember the songs from this hardly at all. And then I saw in the making of, I'm like, oh, this song. Like they showed clips from it. I was like, oh, I really like this. And then watching the thing in its entirety, I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
I think you guys are.
I think I read somewhere. Don't quote me, even though it's on the air. But I
literally
think...
this is a quotation of what you're saying. Like that is what we're putting out there in the world is a record.
But I think I read that Alan Menken felt that was the best. Like that was the best song he had written up to this point, and I would have to agree. It was a very, very good song.
How does it hold up? Female character agency, I think, was a lot better than I expected it to be. But it's still hard in a movie where a central plot point is everyone loves her and she's the focus of the lust of the bad guy. I feel it's not great.
And there are not a lot of other strong women characters besides her.
Yeah.
You could maybe count Laverne, but she's made of stone.
Laverne,
Oh,
yeah,
I count Laverne.
Yeah, so yeah, in that respect. But I do think
I agree.
she very much holds her own, but yeah.
Drinking and smoking, like when she's in her disguise, which I love, with the goats on her head.
Yes, yeah.
So she looks like an old man. They're smoking. They talk about drinking beer at one point and stuff
but
like that.
it's not as heavy-handed as some of the other films.
Yeah,
we've
it's
seen. But there's a lot of other intense moments in this.
Yeah, like that's the thing. We got guns and firearms, which I guess technically there's not. There's a part where he spits the rocks like bullets. Ethnic representation. We have spoken to ethnic representation. I think we've got our bases covered there. But I think while this movie doesn't check those boxes, we don't want that to seem like it's great for young kids.
Agreed.
Because it is darker, it's more complex. There's a lot more to deal with. Like you're gonna have more conversations with your kids. Watch this. I think there's just intense scenes where you're like, oh, as a kid you would have been maybe not understand the theme.
Although I remember seeing it young, and I don't remember it hitting me.
Yeah, but you grew up in Jersey. You saw a body get pulled out of the river,
That's right. In Bayville, you should have seen what happened. What went down in Bayville.
The mean streets of
Bayville.
Bayville.
Streets of Sylvan Lake.
So let's do the guys. I'm going to explain the infallible scientific villain rating to John, and we will be right back. Guys, we're back. John is now an expert in the
I have gotten the boot camp training.
Yes. So let's start. This one's going to be interesting because I don't think I saw Frollo being as high as I think he will end up. And then after watching this movie, I was like, oh, dear.
Yeah.
But there's some categories where he is deficient, I think.
Yes, agreed. But I think he will be, like I said, higher than I thought he would be because I don't really think about Frollo much.
Yeah,
I wonder if some of it has to do with how much of a presence they have in the parks because I don't really know much about Frollo.
In the villain's book, I think they mentioned that he's potentially was in the Fantasmic show, and he potentially is in something else that they do. Because I was surprised that Ratcliffe has a presence in some of those in the parks, and I think Frollo does as well, which kind of surprised me.
So let's start with frightening. I'm thinking pretty high.
I think he's a 5.
Do you think it was a 5?
I'm gonna give him a 5. I mean, okay. Can I just caveat that? Obviously, villains that have the capability of turning themselves into like giant snakes or giant sea witches are deeply frightening. But there's something that is even more frightening to me about Frollo because he's just too real. It's too real. So I find him to be a 5.
That's what I was gonna say. Like he could be someone that we've met. Like,
yes.
He could be a version
He
of
could be someone who was a former president of the United States, perhaps.
So
he has, and the power he has over the people, I think, is frightening.
Yes.
So I was going to give him a 4, but I think the only reason why is because I'm like, there's got to be someone more frightening than Frollo, and I can't think of who it is.
Yeah.
So I'm giving him a 5. He's getting a 5 in frightening.
Yeah.
Funny, however, he will be getting a 1.
Yeah.
Like, I usually try to find one thing funny about a bad guy. There is nothing funny about Frollo.
There's nothing funny about him.
He does not have a sense of humor.
He doesn't have a funny, like, quip moment. You know, like, Jafar's, like, very sarcastic. He's got none of that at all.
Agreed.
So
I agree with a 1.
ones across the board.
Yeah.
Fierce. I mean, he's got a commanding presence, but he doesn't have that drag queen energy.
No, I might give him like a 2 or 3, maybe not a 3.
I'm thinking a 3 because maybe a 2. What do you think?
I don't think he's very.
I mean, he's got that cape situation, but like.
I mean, I'm wondering if I'm putting too much on the fact that he's flowy.
But he doesn't use it. The problem is, I think he has a good costume. He's wardrobed well, but he does not know how to use it. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. I'm gonna say 2 as well.
Yeah, I'm on 2.
I don't think he's very. I'm between a 1 and a 2.
Well, guess what? You don't have to agree with us.
I mean, you have to, but that's fine.
One.
I'll give him a 1.
Yeah.
I'll do
Okay.
it.
All right, effective. So his goal is to eradicate the Romani and then also kill Esmeralda.
Or keep her for himself.
And I don't think he accomplishes any of that stuff, but he's still an effective villain in that he has a reign of terror he has over there. So I think giving him a 2 or a 3 would be okay.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't. His goals do not come to completion, but just the fact that those are his goals too. Like that is a lot.
Well, tell me if I'm. Oh, go ahead, Tara. Sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I was going to ask, and you tell me if I'm analyzing this category correct, the right way. I agree with you that he institutes this reign of terror, and his impact is huge, obviously, on the city and on the characters. But effective at his goal, I think he's a 1, because just like all petty, disgusting tyrants like him, he thinks he has a strategy, but his strategy only fuels and continues to support and prop up that which he's trying to fight.
That's a very good point, but I will say the only reason I don't want to give him a 1 is because to me a 1 is like a bumbling idiot, and he's not that.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
that's my only thing to give him a 2, which I gave him a 2 for me, is I think he's effectively being evil, where there are enemies who are definitely like also
they can't even accomplish that. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll give him a 2.
I'll give him a 2. But yeah, at one point, John, I think it was John who was like, or was it you, Ryan, who was wondering what his exit strategy was. Going back to,
girl,
where are you going here?
Where are you going with this? What's the plan?
But I do think
Frollo?
he was just so crazed that none of that was even a thought at that point. But.
Design, which is his look and his voice acting and stuff like that. I love Tony J, I believe is the actor.
I loved the voice actor. Is the singing voice different? I love
I think that's
that is him as well.
I don't know how
you
could imitate
voice.
that. It's so good.
Yeah.
Because he was a stage actor. He was a prolific, like, all over the place actor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I absolutely loved him in that regard. Also, after reading the art book and how they made such a concerted effort to his coloring, the way he was drawn versus, like, Esmeralda versus Quasimodo, I do like his design. I didn't think it was boring. I thought...
Yeah.
I thought there was some interest there. I love all the rings. I'm going to post a picture. I shared it earlier with us here, but the Disney villain book has put a ring on it, and some of the villains with the best rings. He's got, I think, more than most. He's got like 3 or 4.
I thought there were some interesting moments with his design. Like whenever he takes his, I'm sure there's a word other than hat for what he's wearing, but his hat off, and it kind of diminishes him and makes him more, it kind of takes that top of his shape off and makes him more human and perhaps vulnerable. And I just thought it was a great, it's not a giant sea witch, that's awesome in that regard, but it was still a pretty stellar design, I thought.
Well, and the more he unravels, right? He doesn't wear, hat, for lack of a better term. Once he's completely wild, that hat is no longer, I feel like that's him, very refined, very keeping it together. And that hat is gone. Like, he's not
Yeah.
wearing it in the whole, like, last part of the movie when he's, like, at his craze. I don't want to say crazy, but when he's as crazed.
The other thing about how crazy he gets at the end I want to bring up is he's not like Gaston or Captain Hook where they look like feral, out of control animals. Like, he does a little bit for himself, but he's still restrained. Like,
Yeah. I really like his. I'm between, I think, a 4. I'm going to give him a 4. I'm kind of between a 4 and a 5, but I don't know that he really hits a 5 for me, but I think there's a lot of really strong points with him, so I'm going to give him a 4.
I'm going to do the same.
I'm going to give him a 4. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Go away, Heat.
Oh my gosh.
5, like
16.
Like
But he's
Thousand.
a 5. From
1,000.
the first moment we see him murder someone, try to throw a baby in a well. I mean, like,
use a racial slur.
Try to, like, yeah,
I don't know what else he could have accomplished in a Disney movie to make us hate him more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
there are
truly.
there are other Disney villains that I feel like have we given a 5 go away Heat to any other one?
yeah.
I feel
like Donald Duck's libido and
that's
things like
right.
that. We were like, get out of here.
He will now be what I compare go away Heat. Now that I know what a, like, very strong, intense 5 is, I think I will compare that going forward.
The only villain I could think of who might have more go away heat from me is, and spoiler alert, Hans from Frozen. Because
I was
when
thinking
he
of
does
ones
his
we've
turn,
had. Yeah.
spoiler alert, I go, oh, like in the theater, I was like, what? I'm so mad. Mostly because I got suckered as
You
well.
did. You
Yes.
got suckered.
I
I
also got
everyone
suckered
did.
by
I got
Hans,
suckered
yeah.
as well.
Now, yes factor for me is a 1 because I was literally like, I mean, it may have gone up while I was watching it, but I didn't really want to see this character. It wasn't that I didn't like him, and I think maybe he deserves a 2 or something from me because I thought he was very interesting, and I didn't want him not to be on screen. But I was also like going into it, I was like, I don't remember. I said I thought Frollo was going to be very low.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm going to give him a 2, but like I just because I had a little bit of like, this is interesting, but you guys don't have to do that. You guys can rate him higher because you like this movie more. Maybe you wanted to see him more. You can rate him a 1. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm going to rate him at least 1 step higher. He's nowhere near the level of the villains that there are these movies where I think you guys would agree you're almost rooting for the villain because the villain is just so bad and awesome. But so obviously he doesn't rise to that level. I would give him a 2 or 3, maybe if I can cheat and say a 2.5 because
nope, can't do halves. Do you want a 2 or a 3?
Okay, I'm going to do 3 because it was fascinating. I was very interested in the scenes where he's manipulating Quasimodo, where he's manipulating his guard. He did have this kind of it was just interesting to watch that kind of maniacal skill that he had at, to use Tara's term, gaslight the people around him.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give him a 3 as well.
Ooh.
I was in between a 2 and a 3. But also
I thought you
because
guys might go higher.
I loved his song as a child, like played the soundtrack and belted out Hellfire, which is crazy to think about.
Tara loves Hellfire. We all know
well,
that.
Tara also used to admit to putting on like headphones and dance around the house to songs.
Always. I was an
do you
only
think your
child.
parents ever saw you doing Hellfire and were like, oh no?
I don't know. I was an only child, so a lot of times I would we had a whole stereo system set up that my dad had, so I'd plug in headphones and just dance and sing to stuff. But yeah, no, I agree with John. He's not a villain. He's not one that I normally think of, but he was very interesting to watch, and there were things I was excited about when I saw him. If that
I
makes
agree,
sense.
not as much.
Say that, yeah.
No, that's exactly right. It's not as much as Ursula's my favorite villain, or Maleficent. Even it's I find myself secretly rooting for villains sometimes. I didn't do that with him, but he didn't sink to the level of some villains that I just did not find interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Ryan's telling the score now.
He is 21.3, which rates him as the 17th highest villain, right below Lady Tremaine from Cinderella, and right above.
I still think she's Miss.
Yes, we need to rate her a little higher. And right above Percival C. McLeach from.
Oh, from
Rescuers. We have one more question we always ask, and I think I'm actually a little surprised at where my answer is going to be before we went into it. Is this the one you would add to your collection? You'd get a nice clamshell VHS, put it up on the shelf, or would you lock it away in the vault? And I think I'd get a are you? What are you thinking? You kind of have a look.
I'd get it. I always have a hard time when there's like very negative depictions, but I do think that's a conversation that could be had.
Yes.
But I just think the music is beautiful. The art is beautiful. It's really hard for me to say no. I think I would add this one to my collection.
Agreed. What do you think, John?
I 100% agree, and I agree that there are certainly, like a lot of these movies, things that need to be discussed, but there's just something that is irreplaceable about this sort of story of overcoming and acceptance, and it's just, and the music is just too beautiful to not have in your collection, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for spending the good portion of an afternoon and evening with us. We really appreciate you coming on.
This has been a distinct honor. I've been waiting for it for years.
We ask our guests to plug something, whether it's a personal project, some piece of media you've been enjoying during the pandemic, maybe a political candidate, I don't know, or just something you want to, if you just want to put a general sentiment out there in the world, feel free to plug away here.
That's a great question. So I'm going to stay away from politics because I do that all day long, and it's exhausting. But I will say, I listen to some terrific podcasts, and should I do a podcast? No, you know what? I'm going to go full nerd and return to what we were chatting about off podcast.
I was actually hoping you were going to do that.
Yeah, so anyone out there who is a fan of hard science fiction, so by that I mean, we used the example before of The Martian, where it's an epic adventure thriller story, but it is also based mostly in hard science, and if scientists read it, they say, yeah, that's exactly how that would work. I just finished reading a true epic that a dear friend recommended to me. It's called Seven Eves. And it is a just true odyssey of sci-fi, drama, thriller, and it's based on a sort of apocalyptic event that happens. Filled with, I sobbed during reading it. I laughed when I read it, and the ending it's one of the rare odyssey sci-fi books that really pays off with the ending. So I will say, if you've got 2,000 pages that you want to kill worth of time reading, I would read Seven Eves.
Well, awesome. I think I'll probably be picking that up. I don't know if I'm allowed to get any more books anytime soon. I've got a big pile.
You have to get rid of one before you get one.
I have to get rid of some.
We've ordered a lot of books during the pandemic.
So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Our next movie will be Hercules, with returning guest Amanda. So be sure to turn in for that. Turn in for that. I don't know what the voice that was. Be sure to tune in for that. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
If you want to tell us your favorite Disney villain and why it's guest on, send us an email at trprincessdiaries@gmail.com.
Or you can send a tweet about how great Maleficent is to @TRPDiaries.
Check out our Facebook group by searching for Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, and many more.
Wherever you hear us, please be our knight in shining armor and give us a 5-star review.
Thanks again, and until next time, remember to always live happily ever after.